Hello everyone. Welcome to Midnight Story Channel. I'm here to help you today. I know many of you listen to these stories to help you drift off to sleep, and I'm honored to be part of your journey. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching now? Take a deep breath, get comfortable, and allow yourself to relax. Your story is about to begin. Story 1. The wind howled across the jagged cliffs, carrying the briny scent of the sea as I stood before the imposing silhouette of Tide Manor. Its weathered stone facade loomed like a sentinel against the bruised purple of the twilight sky, its countless windows glinting like the eyes of some ancient, watchful beast. My fingers trembled as I clutched the heavy iron keyring entrusted to me by Mrs. Hawthorne, the manor's reclusive owner. A shiver crawled down my spine, sharp and cold, though I told myself it was merely the bite of the salty air. This was no ordinary job house sitting. A sprawling coastal estate that seemed to have clawed its way out of a penny dreadful was not something I did every day. Yet, the generous payment and my own curiosity had lured me here, to this forgotten corner of the world where the ocean whispered secrets to the shore. I approached the massive double doors, their carved panels depicting twisting vines and strange, half-human figures that seemed to writhe in the fading light. The key turned with a reluctant groan, and I pushed the doors open, wincing as they screeched on rusted hinges, the sound reverberating through the cavernous foyer like a banshee's wail. "Hello?" I called, my voice a fragile thing, swallowed by the vastness of the space. The only reply was the rhythmic crash of waves far below and the faint, mournful ticking of a towering grandfather clock, its pendulum swaying like a heartbeat in the gloom. "Get a grip, Eliza," I muttered, shaking off the unease that clung to me like damp seaweed. Mrs. Hawthorne had assured me I'd be alone, that the manor was empty save for its ghosts of grandeur. No need to let my imagination run wild. I dragged my suitcase across the polished marble floor, the wheels clattering in the silence, and ascended the grand staircase, its crimson runner soft beneath my boots. The air grew heavier with each step, thick with the scent of aged wood and something sharper, like salt and decay. The bedroom Mrs. Hawthorne had assigned me was a relic of opulence, its walls draped in faded silk wallpaper, the four-poster bed draped in velvet curtains that could have shrouded a small ship. It dwarfed my modest apartment back in the city, and I unpacked with haste, eager to explore the manor before the last threads of daylight vanished. Each room I entered was a testament to a bygone era, a library with towering shelves of leather-bound tomes, their spines cracked like ancient skin. A conservatory where exotic ferns curled against fogged glass. A music room where a harpsichord sat silent, its keys yellowed like old bones. The manor was a labyrinth of faded splendor, a mausoleum of wealth and secrets. As night draped its inky veil over the cliffs, I retreated to the kitchen, a curious blend of modern stainless steel and Victorian excess. The copper pots gleamed under the fluorescent lights, a stark contrast to the intricate tilework depicting mermaids and shipwrecks. I cooked a simple meal of pasta, the clink of my fork against the plate unnervingly loud in the stillness. The manor seemed to breathe around me, its walls creaking and groaning as if protesting the weight of years. I told myself it was just the wind battering the cliffs, but sleep that first night was a fleeting guest. Every creak of the floorboards, every sigh of the wind through the chimneys, sent me bolt upright, heart hammering, until I remembered where I was. By dawn, I was more exhausted than when I'd lain down, my eyes gritty with fatigue. The next day passed in a haze of routine. I set up my laptop in the library, The Wi-Fi surprisingly robust for such an isolated place, and worked remotely, the rhythmic crash of waves a soothing backdrop. As evening approached, I decided to indulge in the Manor's clawfoot bathtub, hoping the warm water would melt away the lingering tension in my shoulders. I filled the tub with steaming water, the scent of lavender bath salts curling through the air, and sank into its embrace, letting my eyes drift shut. Then it came a heavy thud, followed by the unmistakable tread of footsteps. My blood turned to ice. I froze, the water lapping gently against the porcelain, and strained to listen. There it was again, slow, deliberate steps, as if someone were trying to move without being heard. "It's just the house," I whispered, but the words felt hollow. Deep down, I knew better. With trembling hands, I climbed out of the tub, the cold air biting my skin as I pulled on my clothes. I crept to the bathroom door, pressing my ear against the wood. The footsteps had ceased, but now I heard something else, the soft scrape of drawers being opened and closed. Someone was in the Manor, searching for something. Panic clawed at my throat. My phone was in the bedroom, the nearest landline downstairs in the foyer. I was trapped, alone in this sprawling maze with an intruder. My eyes darted around the bathroom, desperate for a weapon. They landed on a heavy silver candlestick, its base encrusted with wax. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. I gripped it tightly, my knuckles whitening, and took a shuddering breath before easing the door open. The hallway stretched before me, shadowed and silent, the portraits on the walls watching with painted eyes. I could hear movement now, coming from one of the guest bedrooms down the corridor. Moving as quietly as I could, I crept toward the staircase, my bare feet cold against the hardwood. I had just reached the top step when a floorboard betrayed me, creaking loudly under my weight. The noises from the bedroom stopped abruptly, the silence deafening. My heart thundered as I bolted down the stairs, taking them two at a time, the candlestick raised like a club. Heavy footsteps pounded behind me, gaining ground. I sprinted for the front doors, my breath ragged, only to find them locked, the keyring maddeningly absent from my pocket in my panic. I fumbled with the bolts, my hands slick with sweat, as a hand seized my shoulder, spinning me around. I swung the candlestick blindly, feeling it connect with a sickening thud. A grunt of pain followed, and the grip on my shoulder loosened. I didn't pause to see who I'd hit. I ran for the kitchen, the back door my only hope. The kitchen was a cavern of shadows, lit only by the faint glow of the moon through the windows. I stumbled through it, my hip crashing into the edge of a counter, pain flaring but ignored. My hands groped for the back door, fingers brushing the cold glass of its window. I found the handle, slick with my own sweat, and yanked it open, bursting into the night. The sea air hit me like a slap, the cliffs stretching before me, the distant roar of waves a siren's call. I ran toward the rocky path that led to the village below, my socks soaking through in the damp grass. I had just reached the edge of the Manor's grounds when the back door slammed open behind me. "Stop!" A deep voice bellowed, the sound slicing through the wind. Terror spurred me onward, the path treacherous underfoot, rocks threatening to trip me with every step. I didn't know how long I ran, my lungs burning, my legs heavy as lead. Fear was my only fuel, the certainty that stopping meant something unspeakable. At last, when I thought I could go no further, I saw lights twinkling through the mist. A cottage, its windows warm and inviting. I staggered toward it, relief making my head spin. As I crossed the threshold of the garden, I froze. The cottage was familiar, its stone walls and ivy-covered gate unmistakable. It was Tide Manor's gatehouse, a smaller outbuilding I'd passed on my way in. In my blind panic, I'd run in a circle, back to the very place I'd fled. For a moment, I stood paralyzed, unsure what to do. Then I saw headlights in the distance, cutting through the fog. A vehicle in the Manor's drive that hadn't been there before. A police car. Hope surged through me, and I ran toward it, waving my arms. "Help!" I screamed, my voice hoarse. "Please, someone help me." The Manor's front doors swung open, and a police officer stepped out, followed by Mrs. Hawthorne herself. "Oh, thank heavens!" Mrs. Hawthorne cried, rushing toward me, her shawl fluttering in the wind. "Eliza, my dear, are you all right? We've been so worried." I stared at her, my mind reeling. "There's someone in the Manor," I gasped, my words tumbling over each other. "An intruder. They chased me." Mrs. Hawthorne and the officer exchanged a glance, and my stomach twisted. "Eliza," Mrs. Hawthorne said gently, her voice soft as the sea, "there's no intruder. It was only Cornelius." As if summoned, a man appeared in the doorway, tall, with silver hair and a weathered face, a fresh bruise blooming on his cheek. "I'm so sorry for scaring you," he said, his voice deep and warm, the same one that had shouted after me. "I should have let you know I was coming." "Cornelius is my husband," Mrs. Hawthorne explained, her hand resting on my arm. "He wasn't due back from his trip until next week, but it ended early. He came home to surprise me, not knowing I'd asked you to watch the Manor." The adrenaline that had kept me upright drained away, leaving me swaying on my feet. "But the noises," I stammered. "The searching." Cornelius chuckled, rubbing his bruised cheek. "I was looking for my old pipe. Didn't want to wake you, so I tried to be quiet. When I heard you run, I called out, but he gestured to his face. You've got a hell of a swing." My cheeks burned with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry," I said, my voice small. "I thought I didn't." No, it's my fault entirely," Cornelius insisted, his smile kind. "I should have rung ahead or at least turned on a light." Mrs. Hawthorne wrapped her shawl around my shoulders, her touch warm and grounding. "Come inside, dear. You're trembling. Let's get you warmed up, and we'll sort this all out." As we walked back to the Manor, the officer trailing behind, a nervous laugh escaped me. All that terror, all that running, and it had been a misunderstanding, a trick of my own fear-soaked mind. But later that night, as I lay in the vast bed, listening to the Hawthorns' quiet movements through the Manor, a small, nagging doubt lingered. What if it hadn't been Cornelius? What if someone else had been in the shadows, watching, waiting? The Manor was vast, its corridors endless, its secrets buried deep. I pulled the blankets tighter, suddenly aware of how many corners, how many crevices, could hide a presence I'd never see. Sleep was a distant stranger that night, and the waves outside seemed to whisper warnings I couldn't quite decipher. Story 2. The fog clung to the Blackwood wilderness like a shroud, weaving through the gnarled pines and muffling the world in a damp, gray silence. I stood at the edge of a narrow trail, my worn hiking boots sinking into the loamy earth, the weight of my backpack a familiar comfort against my shoulders. The air was sharp with the scent of moss and decay, and a chill settled into my bones, though I told myself it was just the early morning mist. I'd come to these remote woods seeking solitude, a chance to escape the clamor of city life and test my skills against the untamed wild. Growing up in the rugged heart of the Pacific Northwest, I'd spent more time among trees than people. My father's lessons on tracking and survival etched into my muscle memory. But as I gazed into the endless sea of green, a prickle of unease stirred in my gut, a whisper that I was no longer the master of this domain. My name is Ethan, and I've always prided myself on my ability to navigate the wilderness. The Blackwood was a new challenge, its trails less trodden, its reputation shrouded in tales of lost hikers and strange lights in the fog. I'd set out 2 days ago, following a faint path that wound deeper into the forest, my map and compass my only guides. The first day had been exhilarating, steep climbs rewarded with vistas of mist-wreathed valleys, the air alive with the chatter of birds and the rustle of unseen creatures. But by the second day, the trail had grown faint, swallowed by undergrowth, until it vanished entirely. I pressed on, confident in my ability to orient by the sun's muted glow and the steady needle of my compass. Now, surrounded by towering trees and jagged boulders, every direction looked the same, an endless maze of green and gray. I took a deep breath, the damp air heavy in my lungs, and muttered, "Stay calm, Ethan. Panic is the enemy." I decided to climb a nearby ridge, hoping to spot a landmark, a river, a peak, or even the distant glint of a highway. The ascent was brutal, roots snagging at my boots, my muscles burning with each step. I was rationing my water, the weight of my canteen worryingly light, unsure when I'd find a stream to refill it. As I neared the crest, a sound stopped me, cold voices, low and harsh, drifting through the fog. My heart leapt. Other hikers, perhaps, who could help me find my bearings. I quickened my pace, ignoring the ache in my thighs, the fog parting just enough to reveal the ridge's summit. But as I drew closer, the voices sharpened, their tone not the cheerful banter of adventurers but something darker, laced with anger and urgency. The clank of metal against metal punctuated their words, a sound that sent a shiver down my spine. Years of hunting with my father had taught me to move silently, and I instinctively slowed, my steps careful, deliberate. I crouched behind a moss-covered boulder, my breath shallow, and peered into a small clearing below. What I saw turned my blood to ice. 3 men stood in the mist, their figures rough-hewn, clad in tattered jackets and mud-stained boots. Their beards were unkempt, their eyes hard as flint, but it wasn't their appearance that gripped me with fear. It was what they were doing. Scattered around them were plastic jugs, coils of tubing, and a propane tank, its blue paint chipped and rusted. One man carefully measured a white powder into a container, while another stirred a bubbling pot over a portable stove, the acrid chemical stench cutting through the fog. I didn't need to be an expert to know what I was looking at, a meth lab, hidden deep in the wilderness where no one was supposed to find it. Except I had. I held my breath, every muscle tensed, not daring to move. These men were dangerous, their movements precise, their voices low but laced with menace. If they saw me, I doubted they'd let me walk away. "Damn it, Ray," one of them snapped, his voice sharp as a blade. "I told you to watch the heat. You'll ruin the whole batch." "Back off, Cal," the man at the stove shot back, his spoon clattering against the pot. "I know what I'm doing." "Both of you, shut it," growled the third, a hulking figure with a scarred face, clearly the leader. "We don't need your bickering drawing attention. Last thing we need is some rangers sniffing around." If only they knew how close they were to the truth. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure they'd hear it. I needed to get out of there, to find a way back to civilization and alert the authorities. But which way? I was lost, the fog and trees conspiring to erase any sense of direction. One wrong move, one snapped twig, and I'd be done for. Slowly, carefully, I began to back away, my eyes fixed on the clearing. My boot brushed against a branch, and the crack echoed like a gunshot in the stillness. I froze, my pulse roaring in my ears. What was that? Kel said sharply, his head whipping toward the sound. Probably just a deer, Ray muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. Check it out, the leader ordered, his tone brooking no argument. Could be a bear, drawn by the smell. Footsteps crunched through the undergrowth, coming closer. Panic surged through me, drowning out reason. I bolted, no longer caring about stealth, crashing through the brush as branches clawed at my face. Behind me, shouts erupted they'd seen me. I ran like a hunted animal, leaping over fallen logs, the fog swallowing the world around me. My lungs burned, my legs screamed, but the sound of pursuit, heavy boots pounding, angry curses kept me moving. I had no plan, no destination, only the primal need to escape. The forest seemed to close in, the trees a blur of green and shadow. I could hear them gaining, their voices sharp with intent. There he is. One shouted too close for comfort. My chest heaved, my mouth dry as ash, but fear was a relentless driver. Suddenly, the ground vanished beneath me. I'd run straight off a steep incline, tumbling down a rocky slope in a dizzying whirl of earth and sky. I hit the bottom hard, the breath knocked from my lungs, pain radiating through my ribs. For a moment, I lay there, dazed, gasping for air. Then I heard them again, their voices closer, the clatter of rocks as they began their descent. Ignoring the fire in my side, I forced myself to my feet and ran, the forest denser here, the undergrowth a tangle of thorns and vines. It slowed me, but it would slow them too. I pushed forward, branches tearing at my clothes, my face stinging with fresh cuts. Time lost meaning, each step a battle against exhaustion and terror. Just when I thought I could run no further, I burst through the tree line onto a narrow, paved road. Relief flooded me, so intense I nearly wept. A road meant civilization, safety, people. I glanced behind me, half expecting to see the men emerging from the fog, but the forest was silent. I turned and ran along the asphalt, my boots slapping rhythmically, my lungs screaming. The road stretched endlessly, deserted, no sign of a car or truck to flag down. I pushed on, driven by the distant shouts that still echoed in my mind. After what felt like an eternity, a faint glow pierced the fog, a neon sign, garish and glorious, proclaiming a roadside diner. I staggered into the gravel parking lot, startling an old man fueling his pickup. "Please," I rasped, my voice raw, "I need help. Call the police." The man took one look at me, wild-eyed, covered in cuts and mud, chest heaving, and hurried into the diner. Moments later, he returned with the manager, who was already on the phone with 911. As I sank to the ground, my legs giving out, the manager relayed my condition to the dispatcher, his voice urgent. The old man draped his jacket over my shoulders, murmuring words of comfort I barely registered. When the wail of sirens finally reached me, I let myself believe I was safe. The aftermath was a whirlwind of police interviews and medical checks. I told them everything: the lab, the men, the chase through the fog-drenched woods. They found the site, abandoned but littered with evidence of recent activity, the chemical stench still lingering. The men, however, had vanished into the vast wilderness, leaving no trace. The authorities assured me they'd keep searching, but I could see the doubt in their eyes. The Blackwood was a labyrinth, swallowing secrets as easily as it swallowed men. It took months to feel at ease in the woods again. The forest, once my sanctuary, had become a place of shadows and dread, every rustle a reminder of that day. But slowly, I reclaimed it, hiking with friends, sticking to well-trodden trails. I carry a satellite phone now, and my father's old hunting knife, its way to quiet reassurance. The Blackwood taught me that even in the wild's deepest heart, you're never truly alone, and sometimes, that's the most terrifying thought of all. Story 3. The flickering gaslights cast trembling shadows across the cavernous expanse of the iron depot, their weak glow barely piercing the oppressive darkness that clung to the abandoned train station. The air was thick with the scent of rust and mildew, and the distant drip of water echoed like a metronome in the silence. I adjusted my security badge, the weight of my flashlight a reassuring heft in my hand, and began my rounds, my boots clacking against the cracked marble tiles. The depot, once a bustling hub of travelers and commerce, now stood as a decaying monument to a forgotten era, its vaulted ceilings and ornate arches shrouded in dust. My name is Lucas, and for the past 3 years, I've been the night watchman here, patrolling its endless corridors and platforms, ensuring no vagrants or thrill seekers disturb its ghostly solitude. It's a lonely job, but the quiet suits me, or so I thought, until that night when the depot revealed its darker secrets. I arrived at 10 p.m., nodding to Clara, the last of the cleaning crew, as she shuffled out with her mop and bucket. "Quiet night, Lucas?" she asked, her voice warm despite the late hour. "As always," I replied, forcing a smile. "See you tomorrow." If only I'd known how wrong I was. I settled into the security office, a cramped room tucked beneath a rusted staircase, its walls lined with grainy monitors displaying feeds from the station's scattered cameras. I scanned the screens, seeing nothing but empty platforms and shadowed ticket booths, the occasional moth fluttering into the light. Perfect. Around midnight, I began my first patrol, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the gloom, illuminating faded posters and chipped mosaics. The depot always felt eerie at night, its vastness amplifying every sound, every creak of settling metal. I'd never admit it aloud, but the mannequins in the old department store display, their blank faces peering from behind grimy glass, always set my nerves on edge, as if they were watching me pass. I was crossing the central concourse, its massive clock frozen at 3:17, when a sound stopped me dead, a faint, metallic scrape, like a blade dragged across steel. I froze, my flashlight beam trembling in my grip, and strained to listen. There it was again, sharper now, echoing from the lower platform. "Hello?" I called, my voice booming in the emptiness, only to be swallowed by the silence. I swept my light across the darkened ticket counters and boarded up kiosks, seeing nothing out of place. "Just the pipes," I muttered, trying to quell the unease slithering up my spine. The depot was old, its bones creaking with age. But the sound had been too deliberate, too alive. I continued my rounds, my senses heightened, every shadow seeming to pulse with menace. By the time I returned to the security office, my nerves were frayed, my palms slick with sweat. I sank into my chair, eyes glued to the monitors, searching for anything to explain the noise. That's when I saw it, a flicker of movement on Platform 4's feed, a shadow darting across the screen so quickly I questioned my eyes. My heart raced as I leaned closer, rewinding the footage. There it was again, a figure too fast to identify, slipping into the darkness. My mouth went dry. Someone was in the depot. I grabbed my radio, my thumb hovering over the call button, but hesitated. What if it was a trick of the light, a glitch in the ancient cameras? I didn't want to be the guard who summoned the police over nothing, earning a reputation for jumping at shadows. Against my better judgment, I decided to investigate alone, arming myself with my flashlight and a heavy wrench I kept in the desk drawer for emergencies. The wrench's cold steel grounded me as I stepped back into the concourse, the depot now a labyrinth of threats, every corner hiding potential danger. The air grew colder as I descended to the lower platform, the gas lights flickering like dying stars. My flashlight beam danced across rusted tracks and abandoned luggage carts, the silence so thick it pressed against my eardrums. As I neared the old baggage claim, the scraping sound returned, louder, unmistakable, coming from inside the shuttered ticket office. My pulse thundered, my grip tightening on the wrench. The office's metal shutter was intact, but as I crept closer, I saw a gap at the bottom, just wide enough for someone to slip through. My mind screamed to turn back, to call for backup, but a stubborn sense of duty pushed me forward. I knelt, wincing as the shutter creaked, and shone my light inside. The office was a tomb of shadows, its counters littered with yellowed papers and broken typewriters. Security. I called, my voice steady despite the fear clawing at my chest. Show yourself. Silence answered, then a sudden crash from the back of the room. My flashlight caught a glimpse of movement. Someone was there. I stood, my wrench raised, and moved deeper into the office, the darkness swallowing my light. Another crash, closer now, and I spun, heart hammering, but saw nothing. They were playing with me, I realized, toying with my fear like a cat with a mouse. Suddenly, the gas lights flared to life, bathing the office in a sickly yellow glow. I blinked, momentarily blinded, and when my vision cleared, I saw them, 3 men, clad in black, their faces obscured by crude masks. They stood in a semicircle, blocking my path to the shutter, one holding a crowbar, another a glinting knife. The leader, a wiry man with eyes like chipped ice, smirked beneath his mask. Well, he said, his voice a low rasp. Looks like we've got a hero. I raised my wrench, trying to project confidence I didn't feel. You're trespassing, I said, surprised at the steel in my voice. Leave now, and I won't call the cops. They laughed, a chilling sound that echoed off the walls. You don't get it, do you? The leader sneered. We're not going anywhere, and neither are you. They advanced, spreading out to flank me, their movements predatory. My back hit a counter, and in a flash of desperation, I grabbed a dusty ledger from the shelf and hurled it at the nearest man. He ducked, cursing, and in that split second of distraction, I ran. I dove for the shutter, sliding under it with a scrape of metal, and sprinted across the platform, their shouts ringing behind me. The depot became a maze of tunnels and stairwells, my flashlight beam bouncing wildly as I ran. I needed to reach the security office, to call for help, but they were between me and my sanctuary. I veered into a service corridor, the narrow passage lit only by dim emergency bulbs, their red glow casting blood-like shadows. The door slammed shut behind me, muffling the sound of pursuit, but I could still hear them, their boots pounding like war drums. I ran blindly, taking random turns through the warren of corridors, my breath ragged, my legs burning. The depot's underbelly was a labyrinth of concrete and steel, the air heavy with the stench of oil and damp. I found myself in the basement, surrounded by hulking machinery, boilers, generators, their hum deafening, masking the sound of my pursuers. I crouched behind a massive furnace, its heat searing my skin, and tried to think. My radio was back in the office, my phone in my locker. I was alone, cut off, with no way to call for help. A noise to my left made me freeze, a soft clink, deliberate, close. One of them was here, searching, his flashlight beam sweeping the floor. I held my breath as the light passed inches from my boots, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. For a moment, I thought he'd seen me, but the beam moved on, his footsteps fading. I waited, counting my breaths, then crept toward the stairs, every nerve screaming. I'd almost reached them when a hand clamped onto my shoulder, yanking me back. I swung my wrench blindly, feeling it connect with a solid thud. A grunt of pain followed, and I broke free, taking the stairs two at a time. I burst back into the main concourse, the gas lights flickering wildly, as if mirroring my panic. Shouts echoed behind me, they were all after me now, their voices a chorus of rage. I ran faster than I ever had, my lungs searing, my vision tunneling. Ahead, I saw it, the main exit, its glass doors promising freedom. I slammed into them at full speed, my shoulder aching from the impact, but they didn't budge. Of course they were locked, secured by my own hand at the start of my shift. Panic clawed at me as I fumbled for my keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip them. Behind me, the sound of boots grew louder, closer. "Come on, turn," I hissed, jamming the key into the lock. Just as their shadows loomed at the edge of my vision, the lock clicked. I yanked the door open and stumbled into the night, the cold air hitting my face like a slap. I sprinted across the empty parking lot, not daring to look back, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I didn't stop until I reached the all-night cafe across the street, bursting through the door and startling the lone barista. "Call the police," I gasped, collapsing against the counter. "Please, now." The next few hours were a blur of flashing lights and urgent voices. The police searched the depot, finding only shattered display cases and a discarded crowbar, the intruders long gone. I recounted everything, the noises, the masked men, the chase, my voice hoarse, my hands still trembling. They found no trace of the intruders, just signs of a hurried escape, but the evidence corroborated my story. I quit my job the next day, unable to face the depot's shadowed halls, the memory of being hunted too raw. Sometimes, in the dead of night, I wake in a cold sweat, the echo of footsteps ringing in my ears, and I wonder what might have happened if I hadn't reached that door in time. The iron depot stands empty still, its silence hiding secrets I'll never uncover, and I'm content to leave them buried in its rust and shadows. Story 4. The embers of our campfire hissed and popped, their feeble glow barely holding back the suffocating darkness that pressed in from the Bitterroot wilderness. The forest around us was a cathedral of shadows, its towering pines swaying in the restless wind, their needles whispering secrets to the star-strewn sky. I sat close to the flames, the warmth a fragile shield against the chill that seeped through my jacket, and glanced at Lila, her face illuminated by the fire's dance. We'd come to these untamed Montana woods for a weekend escape, a celebration of our 3rd anniversary, craving the kind of solitude only the deep wild could offer. But as I stared into the blackness beyond our small circle of light, a creeping dread coiled in my gut, a primal warning that we were not as alone as we'd believed. My name is Noah, and I've always found solace in the wilderness, but that night, our idyllic retreat was about to unravel into a desperate fight for survival against a malevolence we never saw coming. The first day had been a dream woven from sunlight and laughter. Lila and I hiked through emerald valleys, the air sharp with the scent of pine and wild mint, the distant peaks of the Bitterroot Mountains jagged against the horizon. We followed faint trails, our boots crunching on gravel and moss, the forest alive with the trill of warblers and the scamper of unseen creatures. By dusk, we'd found the perfect campsite, a sheltered clearing beside a gurgling creek, its water glinting like liquid silver in the fading light. We pitched our tent, its green nylon a vibrant contrast to the earthy tones around us, and built a fire, the crackle of burning wood a soothing counterpoint to the creek's murmur. As night fell, we roasted marshmallows, their sugary char filling the air, and traced constellations in the endless sky, our voices soft, our hearts full. It was everything we'd hoped for, a moment of pure, unspoiled connection. The second day, however, brought a subtle shift, like a cloud passing over the sun. We set out to explore a nearby ridge, our packs light, our spirits high despite the early morning chill. The trail climbed steeply, roots and rocks challenging our footing, but the views were worth it, sweeping vistas of forested slopes and distant snow-capped peaks. Lila stopped abruptly as we neared the ridge's crest, her hand gripping my arm. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, her voice taut, her eyes scanning the trees. I froze, listening, but caught only the usual forest symphony, the rustle of leaves, the chatter of a squirrel. "Hear what?" I asked, my brow furrowing. "Voices," she said, her gaze darting through the undergrowth. "Like someone shouting, out there." I strained my ears, but the forest remained stubbornly silent. "Probably just other hikers," I said, forcing a reassuring smile, though a knot of unease tightened in my stomach. We pressed on, but the carefree joy of the morning had evaporated. Every snapping twig, every flutter of leaves, set my nerves on edge, and Lila stayed close, her usual boldness replaced by wary glances over her shoulder. I couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were on us, hidden in the green, watching our every move. By the time we returned to our campsite, the sun was sinking, painting the sky in fiery hues of amber and crimson. The beauty did little to dispel the tension that had settled over us like a fog. As we prepared a simple dinner of rehydrated chili, Lila's voice broke the silence. "Maybe we should pack up and head out tomorrow," she said, stirring the pot over the fire. "I've got a bad feeling about this place." I wanted to agree, to admit the same unease gnawing at me, but pride or stubbornness held me back. "Let's give it one more night," I said, poking at the fire with a stick. "We came for an adventure, right? It's probably just our imaginations getting the better of us." Lila nodded, but her eyes betrayed her doubt, and if I'm honest, I wasn't convinced either. As darkness enveloped the clearing, we huddled closer to the fire, its flames casting flickering shadows that danced like specters on the surrounding trees. We spoke in hushed tones, as if afraid of being overheard, every rustle in the underbrush making us flinch. The forest, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cage, its vastness both isolating and oppressive. It was just past midnight when the sound shattered our fragile calm, a long, low whistle, eerie and deliberate, followed by an answering call from the opposite side of the clearing. Lila's fingers dug into my arm, her breath hitching. "Noah," she whispered, her voice trembling. "There's someone out there." Before I could respond, a figure stepped into the firelight's edge, a man, tall and gaunt, his face shadowed by a scruffy beard, his clothes tattered and stained. He cradled a hunting rifle, its barrel glinting in the glow. "Well, now," he drawled, his voice rough as gravel, "looks like we've got visitors, boys." As if summoned, more figures emerged from the darkness, 5 in total, all armed, their eyes gleaming with a predatory hunger. My stomach lurched as I took in their weathered faces, their movements deliberate, like wolves circling prey. I stood slowly, pulling Lila with me, my mind racing. "We don't want trouble," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the fear clawing at my chest. "We're just camping. We'll pack up and leave right now if you want." The leader laughed, a harsh sound that grated against the night. "Oh, you ain't going nowhere," he said, stepping closer, his rifle loose but ready. "See, we've got a little business out here, and we can't have you two running off to tell tales." My mind spun, piecing together the truth. Drugs, meth, cocaine, something illicit cooked or stored in these remote woods, far from prying eyes. We'd stumbled too close to their operation, and now we were a liability. Lila's voice, high with panic, cut through my thoughts. "We haven't seen anything," she pleaded. "We don't even know where we are. Please, just let us go." The leader tilted his head, as if considering, then shook it slowly. "Can't take that chance, darling," he said, his tone mocking. "You're staying with us for a while." His men tightened their circle, their weapons glinting, and I saw a flash of metal. One held a coil of rope, its purpose chillingly clear. In that moment, survival instinct took over. I grabbed a burning log from the fire, its heat searing my palm, and hurled it at the nearest man. He yelped, embers scattering across his chest, and the others flinched, startled. "Run!" I shouted, shoving Lila toward the darkest part of the forest. We crashed through the underbrush, branches whipping at our faces, roots threatening to trip us with every step. Behind us, shouts of rage erupted, followed by the thunder of pursuit. We ran blindly, the forest a blur of shadow and thorn, our breaths dragged, our hearts pounding. Lila stumbled, and I caught her, dragging her forward. "Keep going," I gasped, my voice hoarse. "We can't stop." The men were close, their flashlight beams slicing through the darkness, their curses echoing like war cries. They knew these woods better than we did, their footsteps gaining with every second. Just when I thought we were done for, we burst onto the edge of a steep ravine, the creek we'd camped by now a roaring torrent far below, its waters churning in the moonlight. Lila's eyes were wild with fear. "What do we do?" she cried, her voice breaking. I glanced back, seeing the flashlight beams dancing closer. There was no time to think. "We jump," I said, pointing to the other side of the ravine, maybe 12 feet across. It was a desperate gamble, but our only chance. Lila looked at me like I'd lost my mind, but the sound of approaching voices made her decision. She nodded, her jaw set. "On 3, I said, gripping her hand, her fingers cold and trembling in mine. 1, 2, 3. We leaped, the ground vanishing beneath us, the roar of the water drowning out the world. For a heart-stopping moment, we hung in the air, weightless, then hit the far side, rolling to break our fall. Pain shot through my knee, but adrenaline kept me moving. I pulled Lila to her feet, and we staggered into the trees, The shouts of frustration behind us proof that the ravine had bought us time. We kept moving, pushing our exhausted bodies beyond their limits, the forest a relentless gauntlet of brambles and shadows. Every sound, every snap of a twig, every hoot of an owl had us freezing, certain our pursuers were upon us. As dawn's first light filtered through the canopy, painting the trees in shades of gold, we heard it, the distant hum of engines, the blessed sound of traffic. We'd reached a road. Stumbling out of the forest, we flagged down the first vehicle we saw, an old logging truck, its driver a grizzled man with a weathered face. He took one look at us, dirty, bleeding, eyes wide with terror, and threw open the passenger door. "Get in," he said, his voice gruff but kind. As he drove us to the nearest ranger station, we poured out our story, the words tumbling over each other in our desperation. The ranger station was a simple log building, but to us, it was salvation. The ranger, a stern woman with a no-nonsense air, listened intently, her expression hardening as we described the armed men. She ushered us inside, locking the door, and grabbed a radio to call for backup. "Stay here," she ordered, moving to the window, her hand resting on the pistol at her hip. We could hear the men approaching, their voices raised in anger, but the sight of the ranger and the distant wail of sirens broke their resolve. They fled back into the forest, their footsteps fading as reinforcements arrived. The aftermath was a haze of police reports and medical checks. Lila and I gave detailed statements, describing the men, their weapons, the terror of the chase. The authorities searched the woods, but the men had vanished, their operation likely dismantled in haste. Days later, they were caught trying to cross the state line, their truck loaded with evidence of their crimes. Lila and I never returned to the Bitterroot, our taste for remote camping soured by the ordeal. But the experience forged a deeper bond between us, a shared strength born of surviving the unthinkable. Now, when we sit by a fire, always in a crowded campground, never far from others, we recall that night not with fear but with a quiet pride. We faced the wilderness's darkest face, the human predators who lurk in its shadows, and we emerged stronger. The Bitterroot taught us that beauty and danger are two sides of the same coin, and sometimes, the greatest adventure is simply coming home alive. Story 5. The endless ribbon of Route 93 unfurled before me, a scar of asphalt cutting through the Nevada desert's blackened heart, its edges swallowed by the moonless night. My rig's headlights carved twin tunnels through the darkness, catching the glint of a faded road sign or the fleeting glow of a coyote's eyes. The hum of the engine and the soft croon of a late-night radio show some conspiracy nut raving about government cover-ups were my only companions after hours of driving. I'd been a long-haul trucker for nearly 2 decades, my life measured in miles and cargo, but nothing in those years could have braced me for the nightmare that began when I stopped for a stranger on that desolate stretch of road. My name is Caleb, and what started as a routine haul from Reno to Tucson was about to spiral into a deadly game of cat and mouse under the unforgiving desert sky. It was just past midnight, the air heavy with the scent of creosote and dust, when I spotted him, a lone figure standing on the shoulder, thumb raised, silhouetted against the star-pricked horizon. Hitchhikers weren't uncommon on these lonely roads, but I rarely picked them up. Too many stories of robberies, of drivers vanishing into the night. Yet something about this man made me ease off the accelerator, my rig's air brakes hissing as I pulled onto the gravel-strewn shoulder. Maybe it was the isolation, the way the desert seemed to stretch into eternity, or maybe I was just tired of my own thoughts. I leaned across the cab and swung open the passenger door, the hinges creaking in protest. "Where you headed?" I asked as he climbed in, his movements quick, almost wary. "South," he said, his voice clipped, eyes scanning the road ahead. "As far as you're going." I gave him a quick once-over as he settled into the seat. He was younger than me, maybe early 30s, lean as a whip, with close-cropped hair and eyes that seemed to drink in every detail of the cab. He clutched a small duffel bag to his chest, his knuckles white, as if it held his entire world. "I'm Caleb," I said, easing the truck back onto the highway, the engine's rumble filling the silence. "Ethan," he replied, offering no handshake, his gaze flicking to the side mirror. We drove in quiet, the desert a blur of shadow and sand outside the windows. I tried to spark conversation, asking where he was from, what he did, but Ethan's answers were short, evasive, like stones skipped across a pond. After a while, I gave up, focusing on the road, the radio's static-laced chatter a faint backdrop. The desert had a way of making you feel small, its vastness a reminder of how easily it could swallow you whole. About an hour later, I noticed Ethan's restlessness, his fingers drumming on the duffel, his eyes darting to the mirrors every few seconds. At first, I chalked it up to nerves. Hitching a ride with a stranger in the middle of nowhere wasn't exactly relaxing. But then I caught him glancing at me, his expression sharp, calculating, like a man weighing his odds. A chill slithered down my spine, cold despite the cab's warmth. "Everything okay?" I asked, keeping my tone light, my hands steady on the wheel. "Fine," he said too quickly, his voice tight. "Just not used to trucks this big." I nodded, but his words rang hollow. My instincts, honed by years navigating the open road, screamed that something was wrong. The desert stretched on, empty save for the occasional tumbleweed skittering across the pavement, but the cab felt smaller, the air thicker, as if Ethan's presence had altered its gravity. We were passing through a particularly desolate stretch, the horizon unbroken by light or life, when Ethan's voice cut through the silence. "Pull over," he said, his tone sharp, urgent. "What?" I glanced at him, my stomach knotting. "Pull over. Now." His hand moved, and my blood turned to ice. He was holding a pistol, its barrel trained on my chest, the metal glinting in the dashboard's glow. My mind raced, thoughts of my wife, Mara, and our 2 kids flashing like a slideshow. Was this a robbery? Was he going to kill me and take the rig? I gripped the wheel, my voice steady despite the fear clawing at my throat. "Look, man, if it's money you want, I've got cash in my wallet. Take it and go. No need for this to get messy." Ethan's laugh was harsh, devoid of humor. "This ain't about money, Caleb. This is about survival. Now pull over before I paint this cab with your brains." I did as he said, guiding the rig onto the shoulder, the gravel crunching under the tires. As the engine idled, Ethan moved with startling speed, reaching across me to yank the keys from the ignition. "Get out," he ordered, gesturing with the gun. My legs felt like jelly as I climbed down, the desert air biting my skin. Ethan followed, the pistol never wavering, his eyes scanning the darkness. "What do you want?" I asked, hating the tremor in my voice. "I need your truck," he said, his tone flat. "And I need you to drive it." "Drive where?" I asked, my mind scrambling for a way out. "You'll know when we get there. Now get back in." "You're driving." I climbed back into the cab, my thoughts a whirlwind. Could I overpower him? grab the gun, crash the rig to draw attention? But Ethan seemed to read my mind, his voice low and menacing. Don't try anything stupid, Caleb. I've got nothing to lose, which means you've got everything to lose. Just drive. So I drove, the desert unfolding endlessly before us, the radio now silent, the only sound the rumble of the engine and the whisper of tires on asphalt. Hours bled into each other, the landscape shifting from sand to scrub as we headed south. Ethan kept the gun trained on me, his eyes flicking between the road and the mirrors, his tension palpable. I stole glances at him, trying to piece together who he was running from. A debtor? A rival? His silence offered no answers. Finally, I couldn't hold back. Who's after you? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, softly, bad people. People who want me dead. Why? I pressed, my curiosity outweighing my fear. He laughed, that same bitter sound. Because I know things. Things they don't want anyone else to know. My mind raced with possibilities, a whistleblower, a witness, someone who crossed the wrong people. Whatever it was, I was now entangled, a pawn in a game I didn't understand. As dawn began to paint the sky in hues of rose and gold, Ethan tensed, his gaze fixed on the side mirror. Faster, he snapped, his knuckles white around the gun. I glanced in my rear view and saw it a black SUV, sleek and predatory, gaining fast. I pressed the accelerator, the rig roaring as we picked up speed, but the SUV was relentless, its engine a low growl. It pulled alongside us, and I saw the passenger window roll down, a glint of metal catching the light. Get down! Ethan yelled, just as gunfire erupted, the sharp cracks deafening in the cab. I ducked, the rig swerving as bullets pinged off the metal, glass shattering somewhere behind me. Ethan leaned out the window, returning fire, his shots wild but defiant. The next few minutes were chaos, me wrestling the wheel to keep us on the road, Ethan's gunfire a relentless rhythm, the SUV weaving like a shark. A loud bang jolted the rig, the steering wheel fighting my grip, they'd blown out a tire. I fought to keep us from jackknifing, the desert blurring past, my heart in my throat. There! Ethan shouted, pointing to a sign for a rest stop ahead. Pull in. I veered toward the exit, the rig swaying dangerously, the blown tire screaming against the pavement. We skidded into the rest stop's lot, a cloud of dust and rubber enveloping us. Run! Ethan yelled, already leaping from the cab. I didn't hesitate, hitting the ground running, my lungs burning as we sprinted toward the cluster of buildings, a gas station, a diner, their neon signs dim in the early light. Car doors slammed behind us, shouts of rage cutting through the dawn. We burst into the diner, startling a sleepy cashier behind the counter. Call the police. I gasped, my voice raw. Men with guns, they're after us. Before I could say more, the door flew open, and 3 men stormed in, weapons drawn, their faces hard with intent. The cashier screamed, ducking behind the counter. Ethan shoved me behind a display of beef jerky, raising his gun and firing. The men returned fire, and the diner erupted into a war zone, glass shattering, snack bags exploding, the acrid stench of gunpowder choking the air. I crouched, my heart pounding, the world reduced to noise and terror. How had my quiet night turned into this? The gunfire seemed to last forever, but it was likely only minutes. Then, silence, heavy and sudden. I peered around the display, my breath catching. Ethan stood, his gun still raised. The three men sprawled on the floor, motionless. Blood pooled beneath them, and I fought the urge to retch. In the distance, sirens wailed, growing closer. Someone, maybe the cashier, had called for help. Ethan turned to me, his face grim, etched with exhaustion. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice low. "I never meant for you to get caught up in this." Before I could respond, he was gone, slipping out the back door into the desert's embrace. I thought about following, but my legs refused to move. I sank to the floor, surrounded by the wreckage of the shootout, waiting for the police. The aftermath was a blur of questions and statements, my voice hoarse as I recounted the night's events: the hitchhiker, the chase, the violence. The police were skeptical at first, but the evidence, bullet-riddled rig, bodies in the diner, backed my story. They told me Ethan was a whistleblower, set to testify against a powerful syndicate, the men his pursuers hired to silence him. He vanished into the desert, a ghost swallowed by the sand. I was cleared of wrongdoing, but the experience left its mark. I still drive my routes, hauling cargo across the country, but I'm more cautious now, my eyes scanning the shadows for threats. I never pick up hitchhikers, the memory of Ethan's gun too vivid, his desperate eyes a warning. Route 93 stretches on, its asphalt holding secrets I'll never unravel, and I'm content to let them lie, buried beneath the desert's endless night. Story 6. The first warning came as a guttural sputter from my car's engine, a sound that pierced the silence of the Utah desert like a death knell. The dashboard lights flickered, and the vehicle lurched to a stop on the shoulder of Route 50, its tires crunching against the gravel-strewn sand. I sat frozen, my hands gripping the steering wheel, as the vast emptiness of the night pressed in around me. The stars above burned cold and distant, their light swallowed by the inky blackness that stretched beyond my headlights. I'd been driving for hours, riding the high of a promising job interview in the next state, but now, stranded on this forsaken road, I felt the weight of my isolation. My name is Hannah, and I've always prided myself on my independence, my ability to handle whatever life threw at me. But on that moonless night, my resourcefulness would be tested against a monster masquerading as a savior, and survival would demand every ounce of my cunning. I turned the key in the ignition, willing the engine to catch, but it answered with a feeble click, each attempt more futile than the last. My breath fogged the windshield, the desert's chill seeping through the glass, and I reached for my phone, already knowing it was hopeless. The screen glowed with a mocking no signal, the bars as absent as civilization in this desolate stretch. Route 50, dubbed the loneliest road in America, lived up to its name: no lights, no towns, just an endless ribbon of asphalt flanked by sagebrush and silence. I couldn't stay here. The temperature was plummeting, and sitting in a dead car was a slow death sentence. I had to act. Popping the hood, I stepped into the night, the wind sharp as a blade against my skin. I peered at the engine, a labyrinth of wires and metal that might as well have been an alien artifact. My knowledge of cars began and ended with changing a tire, and the tangle before me offered no easy fixes. I was about to slam the hood shut, frustration burning in my chest, when headlights pierced the darkness, twin beams slicing through the desert's void. Relief flooded me, warm and dizzying. Someone was coming, someone who could help. The vehicle, an old pickup truck with chipped paint and a dented fender, slowed as it approached, pulling onto the shoulder. A man climbed out, his silhouette broad against the glare of his headlights. As he stepped closer, I made out his features middle-aged, with a weathered face etched by sun and time, his flannel shirt and worn jeans giving him the look of a local rancher. His hands were calloused, his smile easy, but something in his eyes, a flicker too brief to name, set my nerves on edge. "Car trouble?" he called, his voice carrying over the wind as he ambled toward me. "Yeah," I replied, forcing a smile, my voice steadier than I felt. "It just died on me. Any chance you know engines?" He chuckled, a warm sound that should have been comforting. "Might know a thing or two. Mind if I take a look?" I stepped aside, watching as he leaned over the engine, his fingers probing with practiced ease. He muttered to himself, poking at hoses and wires, his flashlight beam dancing across the metal. After a few minutes, he straightened, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Looks like your alternator's shot," he said, shaking his head. "Not something we can fix out here, I'm afraid." My heart sank, the desert's vastness pressing closer. "Do you have a phone I could borrow?" I asked, holding up my useless device. "I've got no service." He shook his head, his expression apologetic. "Don't carry one. Never trusted those things. But tell you what, I can give you a ride to the nearest town. There's a mechanic in Jericho, about 30 miles down the road. He'll get you sorted." I hesitated, every instinct screaming caution. Getting into a stranger's truck in the middle of nowhere was a risk, the kind of decision that filled true crime podcasts. But what choice did I have? I couldn't walk 30 miles in the freezing dark, and no other cars had passed in the hour I'd been stranded. "That'd be great," I heard myself say, the words tasting like ash. "Thank you." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes, a detail that lodged in my mind like a splinter. "Happy to help. Name's Roy, by the way." "Hannah," I said, grabbing my purse from the car, my keys clutched tightly in my hand. We climbed into his truck, the cab smelling of stale coffee and leather, the seats cracked and faded. Roy kept up a steady stream of small talk as we drove, asking about my job, my destination, his voice friendly but probing. I answered vaguely, deflecting with questions about the desert, the weather, anything to keep him talking without revealing too much. His responses were genial, but there was an edge to them, a subtle intensity that made my skin prickle. The road stretched on, the desert a featureless expanse outside the windows, and I began to notice the absence of signs, of lights, of anything to mark our progress. "How much farther to Jericho?" I asked after 20 minutes, my voice casual despite the unease knotting my stomach. Roy glanced at me, his eyes glinting in the dashboard's glow. "Oh, we ain't going to Jericho, Hannah." My blood turned to ice, his words a blade slicing through my fragile calm. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Where are we going?" He didn't answer, just pressed harder on the gas, the truck surging forward, eating up the empty road. Panic surged through me, sharp and blinding. I reached for the door handle, yanking at it, but it wouldn't budge. Child locks, I realized, my heart sinking. "Please," I said, my voice breaking, "just let me out. I won't tell anyone, I swear." Roy's laugh was a jagged thing, scraping against the silence. "Oh, I know you won't tell anyone," he said, his tone chillingly calm. "No one ever does." The implication hit me like a physical blow, my mind reeling with the horror of his words. This wasn't his first time. How many others had he lured with promises of help? only to deliver them to some unspeakable fate? My thoughts raced, searching for an escape. Crashing the truck at this speed would kill us both, and reasoning with him seemed futile. His eyes held no trace of mercy, only a cold, predatory gleam. As we sped through the night, Roy began to talk again, his voice eerily conversational. "You know, Hannah, you really shouldn't trust strangers," he said, as if discussing the weather. "Bad things happen to girls who aren't careful. But don't worry, it'll be over soon." Tears burned my eyes, but I forced them back, refusing to let him see my fear. I had to think, to find a way out. A desperate idea sparked, risky but my only chance. I started coughing violently, doubling over in the seat, my hands clutching my throat. "Can't breathe," I gasped, making choking noises, my body convulsing for effect. Roy glanced over, his brow furrowing. "What the hell?" he muttered, concern creeping into his voice. "Hey, cut that out." I slumped further, my coughs turning to wheezes, my eyes fluttering shut. The truck slowed, the engine's growl softening as Roy pulled onto the shoulder. He leaned over, shaking my shoulder roughly. "Wake up, damn it," he snapped, his voice tight with uncertainty. This was it. My eyes snapped open, and I drove my elbow into his face with all my strength, feeling the crunch of cartilage as his nose gave way. He reeled back, howling, blood streaming down his chin. In his moment of shock, I lunged for the keys in the ignition, yanking them free. My fingers scrabbled at the door lock, the mechanism clicking just as Roy recovered, his hand tangling in my hair, yanking me back. I screamed, a sound of rage and defiance, and twisted, my free hand clawing at his eyes. My nails found purchase, and he released me with a cry of agony, clutching his face. I tumbled out of the truck, hitting the hard ground, pain flaring through my shoulder. Scrambling to my feet, I ran, the keys cutting into my palm, the desert a blur of shadow and sand. Roy's curses echoed behind me, his footsteps stumbling in the dark, but I had the advantage. My eyes had adjusted to the night, and I was faster, fueled by terror. I sprinted across the open ground, the wind whipping at my face, my lungs burning with each ragged breath. The desert was alive with sounds, the howl of the wind, the skitter of small creatures, but to my panicked mind, every noise was Roy, closing in. I don't know how long I ran, time dissolving into a haze of fear and exhaustion. Roy's shouts faded, but I didn't slow, driven by the certainty that stopping meant death. Just when my legs began to fail, I saw a faint glow on the horizon, a beacon in the darkness. As I drew closer, the shape of a small gas station emerged, its neon sign flickering like a lighthouse in a storm. I burst through the door, startling the lone clerk, a young man with bleary eyes, his phone glowing in his hand. "Please," I gasped, my voice raw, "call the police." "There's a man," he tried to. The words choked in my throat, the adrenaline that had carried me draining away, leaving me shaky and weak. My legs buckled, and I sank to the floor, the events of the night crashing over me like a wave. The clerk didn't hesitate, grabbing the phone and dialing 911, his eyes darting to the door as if expecting Roy to appear. "Stay there," he said, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. "Help's coming." The police arrived within minutes, their flashing lights a lifeline in the dark. I told them everything, my voice trembling as I described Roy, his truck, the terror of his words. They found him hours later, stranded on the roadside, his truck immobilized without the keys I'd taken. A search of the vehicle uncovered evidence linking him to multiple disappearances, photos, personal items, a grim catalog of his crimes. The realization that I'd escaped a serial predator left me numb, the weight of my survival both a gift and a burden. Physically, I was fine, just cuts and bruises, but the mental scars ran deeper. For months, I couldn't drive at night, the sight of headlights triggering a cold sweat. Every truck on the highway was noise, every shadow a threat. But I survived, outsmarting a monster when the odds were stacked against me. I still travel Route 50 sometimes, and each time I pass that lonely stretch where my car died, I whisper a thanks to the strength I found within myself, to the instinct that kept me alive. My story is a warning: trust your gut, question kindness that feels too convenient, and never underestimate the darkness that can hide behind a stranger's smile. The desert keeps its secrets, but I carry mine with me, a reminder that sometimes, the real monsters are the ones who offer you a ride. Story 7. The crumbling husk of the old Harrow Mill loomed against the slate-gray sky, its shattered windows gaping like the hollow sockets of a giant skull. Tucked in a forgotten corner of a New England town, the mill's rusted smokestacks and sagging brick walls stood as a testament to a bygone industrial age, its silhouette both haunting and magnetic. We stood at the edge of its overgrown lot, our breath fogging in the crisp autumn air, our cameras slung over our shoulders like talismans. My name is Ryan, and I've always been drawn to the eerie beauty of abandoned places, capturing their decay on my urban exploration blog. That day, my friends Nathan, Emma, Caleb, and Zoe had joined me to explore the mill, lured by rumors of its ghostly past and the promise of striking photos. We were thrill seekers, chasing the rush of the forbidden, but we had no idea we were stepping into a nightmare that would test our will to survive and leave us forever changed. The mill's chain-link fence was a rusted relic, its gaps wide enough to slip through with ease. We crossed the cracked asphalt lot, our boots crunching on shards of glass and brittle weeds, the air heavy with the scent of damp earth and rotting wood. "This place is straight out of a horror flick," Zoe whispered, her camera already snapping, capturing the mill's jagged silhouette against the clouds. "That's the point," Caleb grinned, though his eyes darted nervously to the shadowed windows. "Creepy vibes make the best shots." We found an entrance, a side door hanging off its hinges, its warped frame groaning in the breeze. Inside, the mill was a cavern of gloom, its air thick with dust and the musty tang of decay. Sunlight streamed through holes in the roof, illuminating swirling moats and casting long, jagged shadows across the concrete floor. Massive looms stood silent, their rusted frames draped in cobwebs, like skeletal beasts frozen in time. "Let's split up," Nathan suggested, his voice echoing in the vast space. "We'll cover more ground, get better shots." I hesitated, unease prickling my skin, but the others were eager, their excitement drowning out my doubts. We agreed to meet back at the entrance in an hour and scattered, our flashlights carving paths through the darkness. I ventured deeper into the mill, my camera clicking, each frame capturing the eerie beauty of broken machinery and peeling paint. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional drip of water or the creak of settling beams. More than once, I caught my reflection in a grimy window, my own face startling me in the dim light. I was in what seemed to be an old storage room, its shelves littered with moldy ledgers and rusted tools, when a sound froze me in place, a heavy shuffle too deliberate to be a rat or stray animal. My heart kicked into overdrive, my flashlight beam trembling as I swept it across the room. "Guys?" I called, my voice small, swallowed by the mill's vastness. No answer. I turned, my pulse loud in my ears, and that's when I heard it, a low murmur, voices, rough and urgent, coming from a corridor beyond the room. Curiosity battled fear, urging me toward the sound. I crept to a doorway, my boots silent on the dust-covered floor, and peered into a cavernous chamber that must have been the mill's main production floor. My breath caught, my blood turning to ice. 3 men stood in the shadows, their figures weathered and hard, clad in stained jackets and work boots. They were gathered around a cluster of crates, passing plastic wrap packages between them, their movements swift and practiced. Even in the dim light, I knew what I was seeing: a drug deal, hidden in the mill's forgotten depths, where no one was supposed to stumble upon it. But I had. I pressed myself against the wall, my heart hammering, not daring to breathe. These men were dangerous, their voices low but laced with menace. If they saw me, I doubted they'd let me walk away. I was about to back away when my foot brushed a loose bolt, the clink echoing like a gunshot in the silence. One of the men's heads snapped up, his eyes locking with mine across the chamber. Time stopped, the air thick with dread, and then chaos erupted. "Hey!" he shouted, his hand darting to his waist, where a gun's outline bulged beneath his jacket. I didn't wait to see more. I turned and ran, my flashlight beam bouncing wildly, my mind screaming one thought: find the others, get out. The mill became a labyrinth of rusted machinery and collapsed beams, my footsteps pounding against the concrete. Behind me, shouts and heavy boots echoed, the men giving chase, their voices sharp with intent. I rounded a corner and collided with Nathan, both of us sprawling to the floor in a tangle of limbs. "Ryan, what the hell?" he groaned, rubbing his head. "No time," I gasped, scrambling to my feet. "We need to go now." He saw the panic in my eyes and didn't question me. "Emma's nearby," he said, pointing down a corridor. "I don't know where Caleb and Zoe are." We found Emma moments later, her camera dangling from her neck, her face pale as I blurted out what I'd seen: drug dealers, armed, coming for us. Her eyes widened, fear replacing her usual calm. "We need to find Caleb and Zoe," she said, her voice shaking, but before we could move, a scream tore through the mill. Zoe's voice, raw with terror. We ran toward the sound, caution abandoned, our flashlights slicing through the gloom. We burst into a vast room filled with ancient looms, their threads long rotted away, and saw Zoe backed into a corner, one of the men looming over her, his gun glinting. Caleb lay crumpled on the floor, motionless, a trickle of blood on his temple. Without thinking, I grabbed a rusted iron rod from the ground and charged, swinging it with all my strength. The rod connected with the man's shoulder, sending him crashing down with a yell of pain. "Run!" I shouted, hauling Zoe to her feet. Nathan was already at Caleb's side, checking his pulse. "He's alive," he reported, relief flooding his voice. "Just knocked out." The man I'd hit was staggering to his feet, murder in his eyes, as his 2 companions burst into the room, their weapons raised. "You kids picked the wrong place to play," one growled, his voice a low snarl. We were trapped, the only exit blocked, the mill's walls closing in like a tomb. My mind raced, searching for a way out. Then I saw it: a conveyor belt, its cracked leather surface leading to an upper level, partially hidden by a tangle of pipes. "The belt," I hissed to Nathan. "We can get up there." He nodded, understanding instantly. "On 3, he whispered, slinging Caleb's arm over his shoulder. 1. 2, 3. We moved as one, Nathan and I dragging Caleb, Emma and Zoe right behind us. We scrambled onto the conveyor, its rusted frame groaning under our weight, the sharp edges biting into our hands. The men shouted, caught off guard, but their footsteps pounded as they gave chase. We reached the upper level, a maze of catwalks and suspended platforms, the mill's floor sprawling below like a shadowed sea. The structure swayed beneath us, its bolts creaking ominously, but we didn't stop. Which way? Emma panted, her voice tight with fear. I scanned the darkness, my flashlight catching a faded sign on a distant door exit. There. I pointed, and we ran, the catwalks trembling, the sound of pursuit growing closer. The men were climbing now, their curses echoing through the mill. We reached the door, and I yanked it open, revealing a rusted fire escape, its metal steps slick with moss. Without hesitation, we started down, the structure shaking with each step. Halfway down, a gunshot rang out, the sound deafening, the bullet ricocheting off the railing. Keep moving, I shouted, my heart in my throat. We practically slid down the final flights, our boots clanging, and hit the ground running, the mill's shadow looming behind us. We didn't stop until we reached Nathan's van, parked in a nearby alley, its faded paint a beacon of safety. We piled in, Caleb groaning but conscious, and Nathan floored it, the tires screeching as we sped away. Miles from the mill, the adrenaline finally ebbed, leaving us trembling in the van's dim interior. What just happened? Zoe whispered, her voice barely audible. I told them everything, the drug deal, the chase, the terror of being hunted. The reality sank in, heavy and cold. We debated going to the police, fear warring with duty. What if the men had connections, could track us down? In the end, we swore a pact to keep silent, the weight of our survival binding us closer than ever. The old harrow mill changed us. We'd sought a thrill and found a brush with death, the nightmares lingering for months, every creak of a floorboard, every stranger glance a potential threat. We never returned to urban exploring, the rush no longer worth the risk. The mill still stands, as far as I know, its decaying looms silent witnesses to the darkness it harbors. Sometimes, when I pass an abandoned building, I wonder what secrets it holds, and a shiver runs through me, a reminder of the day our curiosity nearly cost us our lives. The real monsters aren't always ghosts, they're the living, breathing dangers waiting in the shadows, and we were lucky to escape their grasp. Story 8. The gas lamps flickered along the shadowed corridors of the Eldridge Library, their golden glow casting trembling pools of light across the polished oak floors. The air was heavy with the scent of aged paper and leather, mingled with the faint tang of sea salt drifting in from the nearby coast. I moved through the silent stacks, my mop gliding across the wood, the rhythmic slosh of water in my bucket a quiet companion in the stillness. My name is Mateo, and for the past 5 years, I've been the night janitor at this historic library, a grand relic of a coastal town's golden age. Its towering shelves and stained glass windows are a haven for scholars by day, but at night, it's just me, the creaking beams, and the stories I scribble in my notebook during the quiet hours. I know every nook of this place, from the rare manuscript room to the dusty basement archives, but on that fateful night, even my intimate knowledge of the library couldn't shield me from the terror that lurked within its walls. I arrived at 10 p.m., nodding to Evelyn, the head archivist, as she gathered her satchel of papers and trudged toward the exit. Her arms were laden with files, likely destined for late-night cataloging at home. Another long one, Mateo? She asked, her smile weary but kind. You know how it is, I replied, holding the heavy oak door open. See you tomorrow. If only I'd known those words might be our last. I began my rounds on the top floor, the grand reading room with its vaulted ceiling and chandeliers draped in dust covers. I vacuumed the intricate rugs, emptied the brass waste baskets, and wiped down the long mahogany tables, the work mindless enough to let my mind wander to the novel I was drafting, a tale of lost sailors and haunted shores. The library was silent save for the occasional groan of settling wood or the distant crash of waves against the cliffs, sounds I'd long grown accustomed to. But as I pushed my car toward the spiral staircase, a sound jolted me from my thoughts, a sharp crash, followed by muffled cursing, echoing from the floor below. I froze, my hand tightening on the mop handle, my heart kicking into an unsteady rhythm. The noise had come from the second floor, maybe the reference section. My first thought was that Evelyn had returned, perhaps forgetting a file, but the curses were too harsh, too raw for her gentle demeanor. I set them up against the wall, my palms slick with sweat, and crept toward the staircase, the gas lamps casting long, distorted shadows across the carved banisters. Each step creaked under my weight, the sound amplified in the library's cavernous hush, and I winced, straining to hear more. As I reached the second-floor landing, voices reached me low, urgent, unmistakably foreign to this place. They were sharp, clipped, the kind of whispers that carried purpose, not curiosity. I eased the heavy door open a crack, peering into the darkened stacks. The sight that met my eyes turned my blood to ice. 3 figures, clad in dark clothing, moved methodically through the reference section, their gloved hands rifling through drawers and cabinets. One held a pen light, its narrow beam dancing across the shelves, illuminating titles in languages I couldn't decipher. They weren't vandals or thrill-seekers, their precision, their silence, spoke of a mission, a search for something specific. Thieves, here in the heart of the Eldridge, and I was alone with them. I let the door close silently, my mind racing like a storm-tossed ship. I needed to call the police, but my phone was locked in my locker in the basement, and the library's landlines were disabled after hours to prevent unauthorized calls. The security office on the ground floor had a dedicated line, a direct link to the authorities, but reaching it meant crossing the library's vast expanse, past the intruders. My heart pounded, each beat a reminder of my vulnerability, but I had no choice. I had to move. As quietly as I could, I descended the staircase, my sneakers soft against the worn steps, the shadows swallowing my form. The library felt different now, its familiar corners twisted into a labyrinth of menace, every creak a potential betrayal. I had just reached the 3rd floor when the stairwell door above me swung open, the sound like a gunshot in the silence. "Check this floor," one of the men barked, his voice low but commanding. "We need those documents." Panic surged through me, sharp and electric. I yanked open the 3rd floor door and slipped inside, praying they hadn't seen me. The reference room stretched before me, its tall shelves looming like sentinels, the air thick with the scent of old ink. I scanned the space, my eyes darting for a hiding place. The open layout offered little cover, but then I saw it, a narrow supply closet tucked between 2 cabinets, its door slightly ajar. I darted across the room, wincing at each footfall, the sound deafening in my ears, and slipped inside, pulling the door shut behind me. The closet was a coffin of darkness, the smell of bleach and paper dust choking. I pressed myself against the back wall, my breath shallow, my body trembling as I peered through the door's thin slats. Flashlight beams swept the room, their light slicing through the gloom, accompanied by the soft tread of boots. "Nothing here," one of the men growled, his voice close enough to make my skin crawl. "Let's try the next floor." I waited, counting my heartbeats, until the sound of their footsteps faded. Only then did I allow myself to exhale, the air shuddering out of me. But I couldn't stay here. They'd searched the entire library, and the closet was a trap, not a sanctuary. I had to reach the security office. I eased the door open, the hinges mercifully silent, and stepped back into the reference room, my eyes scanning for any sign of movement. The library was a maze, its corridors twisting and turning, but I knew its secrets better than anyone. I moved quickly, staying low, my flashlight off to avoid detection. The grand staircase loomed ahead, its steps spiraling down to the ground floor, but I heard voices below, sharp and urgent. The intruders were fanning out, their search systematic. I veered into a side corridor, its walls lined with portraits of long-dead librarians, their painted eyes seeming to follow me. The air grew colder, the sea's distant roar a faint echo through the stone walls. I was halfway to the service stairs when a noise stopped me, a soft clink, deliberate, from the reading room to my left. I pressed myself against a bookshelf, my heart thundering, as a flashlight beam swept the corridor, inches from my feet. One of them was close, his footsteps measured, searching. I held my breath, my body rigid, as the light passed, the man's shadow moving on. I waited until I could no longer hear him, then slipped into the service stairs, their narrow, concrete steps descending into the library's underbelly. The basement was a warren of archives and storage rooms, the air damp and heavy with the scent of mildew. I navigated by memory, my hands grazing the rough walls, until I reached the security office, its door a slab of reinforced steel. I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped them. The lock clicked, and I slipped inside, locking the door behind me. The office was a small fortress, its walls lined with monitors, most dark, but the emergency phone glowed like a beacon. I grabbed it, dialing 911, my voice low and urgent as I whispered my situation to the dispatcher. Intruders, 3 of them, searching the library, possibly armed. "Units are on the way," she assured me, her voice calm but firm. "Stay where you are." I sank into the chair, my eyes glued to the monitors, searching for any sign of the men. The screens flickered, their grainy feeds showing empty corridors and shadowed stacks, but I knew they were out there, their presence a weight in the air. Minutes stretched into eternity, each second a battle against the urge to run, to hide. Then, a shadow moved on the ground floor, feet a figure, dark and purposeful, heading toward the main entrance. My heart leapt. Were they leaving? But before I could process it, a loud bang echoed through the library, the sound of a door being forced. They were coming closer, their footsteps reverberating through the walls. I gripped the edge of the desk, my mind racing. The security office was secure, but if they found me, the flimsy lock wouldn't hold forever. I scanned the room for a weapon, my eyes landing on a heavy brass bookend shaped like a galleon. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. I clutched it, my knuckles white, and waited, the silence heavier than ever. The banging grew louder, closer, and then silence. I held my breath, straining to hear. A faint creak, then the unmistakable sound of boots on the basement stairs. They were here. I backed against the wall, The bookend raised, my pulse a deafening roar. The door rattled, a fist pounding against it, and a voice, low and menacing, called out, "We know you're in there. Come out, and we'll make this quick." I didn't answer, my body trembling, every instinct screaming to fight, to survive. The pounding intensified, the door shuddering in its frame, and then a new sound, sharp and authoritative. "Police. Drop your weapons." Relief flooded me, so intense I nearly collapsed. The pounding stopped, replaced by shouts and the scuffle of retreat. I stayed put, the dispatcher's voice crackling through the phone, urging me to remain in place until the officers secured the building. When the police finally knocked, their voices calm and professional, I opened the door, my hands still shaking. The library was a hive of activity, officers sweeping the stacks, their flashlights cutting through the gloom. I told them everything: the crash, the intruders, their search for documents, my voice hoarse, my body drained. They found signs of the break-in, smashed cabinets, scattered papers, but the men had vanished, slipping into the night like specters. The police assured me they'd investigate, but the library's vastness, its countless exits, made capture unlikely. I quit my job the next day, unable to face the Eldridge's shadowed halls, the memory of being hunted too raw. My novel remains unfinished, the inspiration lost to the terror of that night. Sometimes, when the wind carries the scent of the sea, I hear those voices again, feel the weight of unseen eyes in the dark. The Eldridge Library stands as it always has, its shelves guarding secrets I'll never unravel, and I'm content to leave them buried in its dust and shadows. But I know now that even the most familiar places can harbor danger, and the quiet of the night can hide a storm of violence waiting to break. Story 9. The neon sign of the Driftwood Lodge flickered against the Oregon night, its letters buzzing like a dying insect, casting a sickly green glow over the cracked asphalt of the parking lot. The coastal road stretched dark and desolate in both directions, flanked by windswept pines and the relentless crash of waves against the cliffs below. I stood beside my car, the engine still ticking as it cooled, my duffel bag slung over my shoulder. Exhaustion weighed on me like a sodden cloak. I'd been driving for hours, fleeing the chaos of a recent breakup, seeking solace in the open road. The lodge was a last resort, its vacancy sign the only light in miles, promising rest I desperately needed. But as I approached the sagging porch, its peeling paint and warped boards groaning underfoot, a shiver ran through me, sharp and unbidden, as if the sea itself whispered a warning. I ignored it, chalking it up to fatigue, unaware that this ramshackle inn would become a prison of terror, its shadows hiding a predator far worse than the storm brewing outside. The lobby was a time capsule of faded dreams, its walls papered in garish floral patterns, the air thick with the musty scent of damp carpet and stale cigarette smoke. A bell on the counter jangled as I entered, the sound jarring in the silence. Behind the desk, a woman with graying hair and a pinched face looked up from a dog-eared romance novel. "Room for the night?" she asked, her voice flat, her eyes barely meeting mine. "Yes, please," I said, forcing a smile, my voice hoarse from hours of silence. "Just passing through." She slid a key across the counter, its tag reading room 7 inches in faded ink. $40. Cash up front. Breakfast's at 7, if you're up for it. I handed over the money, my fingers brushing the counter's sticky surface, and she pointed down a dim hallway. "Second door on the right. Keep it quiet, and no guests." I nodded, too tired to question the rules, and made my way to room 7. The hallway was narrow, its carpet threadbare, the walls stained with watermarks that seemed to writhe in the flickering light of a single bulb. The room itself was small and drab, its twin bed sagging under a quilt that smelled faintly of mildew. A chipped nightstand held a lamp with a frayed cord, and a single painting hung above the bed, a faded seascape, its ship tossed on stormy waves, the frame warped as if it had absorbed the sea salt. I locked the door behind me, the bolt sliding home with a reassuring click, and dropped my bag, collapsing onto the bed without bothering to undress. The distant roar of the ocean lulled me, but sleep was restless, punctuated by the creak of the lodge's bones and the howl of the wind. I woke in the early hours, disoriented, my heart racing from a sound I couldn't place, a soft, insistent scratching, like nails on wood, coming from the wall behind the painting. I lay still, straining to listen, the darkness pressing against my skin. The scratching paused, then resumed, deliberate, rhythmic, as if something were trying to claw its way through. My breath caught, my body rigid, as I stared at the painting, its ship seeming to tilt in the shadows. Then, a sliver of light appeared, a faint glow seeping from the wall. The painting was moving, sliding slowly to one side, revealing a hole the size of a fist. And pressed against it was an eye, wide and unblinking, staring directly at me. A gasp escaped me, involuntary, and the eye widened, then vanished, followed by the sound of hurried footsteps retreating. Panic surged through me, hot and electric, propelling me from the bed. I threw on my jacket, shoving my belongings into my bag with trembling hands. I had to get out, to escape whatever or whoever was watching me. As I yanked open the door, I nearly collided with a man standing just outside, his bulk filling the hallway. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a grizzled beard and eyes that gleamed in the dim light. His flannel shirt was stained, his smile too calm, too practiced. "Everything all right, miss?" he asked, his voice smooth as oil, but it sent a chill down my spine. "Heard some noise?" "I'm leaving," I said, my voice steady despite the fear clawing at my chest. "Right now?" His smile faltered, his eyes narrowing. "Now, don't be rash. It's the middle of the night, dangerous for a woman to be out alone." He took a step closer, blocking the hallway's light, and I saw a glint of metal in his hand, a knife, its blade catching the bulb's glow. "Stay away," I warned, my hand fumbling in my bag for my keys, their jagged edges a poor defense. "I don't want trouble." "Can't let you leave," he said, his tone almost regretful, the knife steady in his grip. "You've seen too much." Time slowed, my instincts screaming. I swung my bag at his face, the heavy canvas catching him off guard. He staggered back, cursing, and I ran, my boots pounding the carpet, the hallway stretching endlessly before me. His footsteps thundered behind, heavy and relentless, the knife's threat a specter at my back. I reached the parking lot, the cold sea air hitting me like a slap, and fumbled with my car key, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. The lock clicked just as his hand seized my shoulder, spinning me around. He loomed over me, his face twisted with rage, the knife raised. "You shouldn't have done that," he growled, his breath hot against my face. I reacted without thinking, driving my knee into his groin with all my strength. He doubled over, a grunt of pain escaping him, the knife clattering to the asphalt. I shoved him hard, sending him sprawling, and dove into my car, slamming the door. The engine roared to life, and I floored it, tires screeching as I peeled out of the lot, the driftwood lodge shrinking in my rear-view mirror. His silhouette staggered to its feet, a dark figure against the neon glow, but I didn't look back. I drove for hours, the coastal road a blur of shadows and mist, my heart pounding, my eyes darting to every set of headlights in the distance. The adrenaline kept me alert, but fear lingered, a cold weight in my chest. It wasn't until dawn broke, the sky blushing take over the ocean, that I felt safe enough to stop at a bustling truck stop, its lot filled with rigs and early risers. My hand still trembled as I pulled out my phone, now with a faint signal, and dialed 911. I poured out my story, the hole in the wall, the eye, the man with the knife, my voice shaking but resolute. The dispatcher listened, her tone professional, promising an immediate investigation. The police found the driftwood lodge easily, its reputation already tainted by whispers of missing travelers. Their search uncovered a network of hidden peepholes, each room rigged for surveillance, and evidence linking the lodge to a string of disappearances: solo drivers, drifters, people who wouldn't be missed. The man, who I learned was called Amos, and his wife, the woman at the desk, were arrested, their crimes a horrifying tapestry of predation. The full extent was never publicized, but the rumors were enough to haunt me: tales of rooms that locked from the outside, of guests who checked in but never left. I gave statements, testified at their trial, each step a draining battle to reclaim my peace. It was for me, yes, but also for those who couldn't speak, whose voices had been silenced in the lodge's shadowed rooms. Years have passed, but the nightmares persist: Amos's cold eyes, the glint of his knife, the suffocating terror of being watched. I can't stay in motels anymore, the sight of neon signs or identical doors triggering a visceral dread. But I've grown stronger too, learning to trust the instincts that saved me, to heed the whisper that says something's wrong. I still travel, still seek the open road, but I do so with eyes wide open, my car stocked with supplies, my route planned to avoid the lonely stretches where predators might lurk. Each time I pass a rundown inn on a coastal highway, I offer a silent prayer for those who might be trapped inside, fighting battles unseen. The driftwood lodge taught me that the most ordinary places can hide the darkest secrets, that safety is an illusion when you're alone in the night. And sometimes, behind the flicker of a vacancy sign, someone is watching, waiting for their next guest to check in. Story 10. The crimson lanterns flickered along the winding drive, their blood-red glow casting eerie shadows across the frost-kissed lawns of the Velmont Chateau. The estate loomed like a Gothic cathedral against the starless New England sky, its spires and gargoyles clawing at the darkness, its windows glinting with secrets. I adjusted my mask, a gilded creation of feathers and filigree that covered the upper half of my face, and felt a prickle of unease, sharp as a thorn, despite the laughter and music spilling from the chateau's open doors. My name is Elias, and Halloween has always been my obsession, a night when the veil between worlds thins, and reality bends to the whims of the fantastical. So when Nora, my closest friend, invited me to an exclusive masquerade ball at this secluded estate, I leapt at the chance, envisioning a night of mystery and revelry. But as I stepped into the chateau's gilded halls, I couldn't shake the feeling that the masks around me hid more than faces: they concealed murderous intent, and the night would become a deadly hunt with me as the prey. Nora picked me up in her rattling sedan, her excitement infectious as we left the city behind, the houses giving way to dense forests and rolling hills. "This is going to be legendary," she gushed, adjusting her mask of peacock feathers. "The host spares no expense, and get this, it's a full masquerade. Masks stay on all night." Isn't that thrilling? It's perfect, I agreed. My costume, a velvet cloak and breeches inspired by a Renaissance courtier, feeling both regal and surreal. The drive ended at a tree-lined avenue, the chateau emerging like a vision from a dark fairy tale. Its stone facade was adorned with ivy and lanterns, their crimson light painting the night in hues of fire and shadow. Pumpkins, carved with intricate runes, line the marble steps, their candles flickering like the eyes of watchful spirits. Inside, the grand ballroom was a whirlwind of opulence, its chandeliers dripping with crystal, their light refracting across the polished parquet floor. Guests swirled in elaborate costumes, silks and satins, antlers and lace, all hidden behind masks that ranged from delicate Venetians to grotesque, full-face grotesques. Music pulsed from a hidden orchestra, a haunting waltz that seemed to weave through the air, while waiters in skeletal makeup glided with trays of champagne and delicate canapes. "This is unreal," I breathed, taking in the spectacle, the crowd a living tapestry of color and mystery. "Who's throwing this, anyway?" I asked Nora as we navigated to the bar, squeezing past a group in bestial masks, their eyes glinting through slits. "Friend of a friend," she shrugged, sipping her drink. "Come on, let's mingle." The bartender, his face painted like a grinning skull, mixed our cocktails, and I felt that prickle again, a sensation of being watched. I turned, my gaze landing on a tall figure across the room, cloaked in black, their mask a stark white plague doctor's beak, its hollow eyes fixed on me, or so it seemed. "Creepy costume," I muttered to Nora, nodding toward the figure. She followed my gaze. "Oh, yeah, there's a few of those around. Part of the staff, maybe? Really sets the mood." I nodded, but the unease lingered, growing sharper as the night wore on. More plague-masked figures appeared, silent and unmoving, their black cloaks blending into the shadows. They didn't dance, didn't speak, just watched, their presence a cold weight in the festive air. I was about to suggest we leave, the atmosphere turning oppressive, when the music abruptly stopped. The crowd fell silent, a hush settling over the ballroom like a fog, as a man in an ornate silver mask stepped onto a dais at the room's far end. "Esteemed guests," he intoned, his voice smooth as velvet, resonating with a cultured menace. "Welcome to the Velmont Chateau. I trust you're savoring the night's delights, but now, we unveil the true spectacle." A murmur rippled through the crowd, curiosity mingling with unease. This wasn't on the invitation. He raised a gloved hand, gesturing to a plague-masked figure nearby. "Some among you wear masks of a different purpose," he continued, his tone almost gleeful. "They are our chosen players in tonight's grand game." He clapped, and the plague-masked figures moved with chilling precision, converging on the crowd. Screams erupted as they seized guests seemingly at random, dragging them toward the exits, their struggles futile against the figures' iron grips. I watched, horror rooting me to the spot, as a woman in a butterfly mask was hauled away, her cries swallowed by the chaos. "What the hell?" Nora gasped beside me, her glass slipping from her hand, shattering on the floor. Before I could react, a cold hand clamped onto my arm, a plague-masked figure towering over me, its grip unyielding. "No!" I shouted, twisting, but it was like fighting a statue. The ballroom dissolved into pandemonium, guests running, screaming, masks slipping to reveal terrified faces. I lost sight of Nora in the melee, her peacock feathers vanishing into the crowd. The figure dragged me toward a concealed door, hidden behind a tapestry of twisting vines, my boots scraping against the floor as I fought every step. The silver-masked man's voice cut through the chaos, calm and mocking. "Don't fear, my friends," he called, amusement lacing his words. "Consider it a game, a high-stakes hunt. Evade our pursuers until dawn, and you claim your freedom. Fail, and the consequences will be eternal." His words sank into me like poison. This wasn't a party, but a twisted hunt, and we were the quarry. The plague-masked figure shoved me through the door, and I stumbled down a narrow stone staircase, the air growing cold and damp. The door slammed shut behind me, its echo final, and I found myself in a vaulted cellar, its walls slick with moss, lit by sputtering torches. Other guests were there, their masks askew, their faces pale with terror. Some wept, others pounded on the locked door, their efforts futile. A grinding sound broke the panic, a section of the wall sliding open to reveal a dark tunnel, its depths swallowing the torchlight. "Your hunt begins," the silver-masked man's voice boomed from hidden speakers. "You have until dawn. Good luck." For a moment, no one moved, fear paralyzing us. Then, as if a spell shattered, everyone surged for the tunnel, a desperate stampede into the unknown. I hesitated, my mind screaming trap, but staying meant capture. I plunged into the darkness, the sounds of panicked breaths and hurried footsteps enveloping me. The tunnel twisted and branched, a subterranean maze beneath the chateau, its walls carved with strange symbols that seemed to pulse in the dim light. I tried to track my path, but the turns were disorienting, the air thick with the scent of earth and decay. After what felt like hours, I emerged into a circular chamber, its ceiling lost in shadow, a dry fountain at its center, its marble cracked and stained with age. A handful of other guests were there, their costumes torn, their masks discarded, revealing eyes wide with fear. A man in a tattered lion mask knelt by the fountain, his hands tracing its carvings. "I think I've figured it out," he said as I approached, his voice low. "This isn't just a cellar, it's a network, tunnels and chambers, like a city under the estate." "Why?" a woman in a shredded velvet gown asked, her voice trembling. "Why build this?" Before he could answer, footsteps echoed from a nearby tunnel, heavy and deliberate, accompanied by a sound that froze my blood, the soft scrape of a blade being drawn. "Run!" someone shouted, and we scattered, each diving for a different passage. I ran blindly, my heart pounding, the tunnel's walls closing in, the screams of others echoing behind me. I wanted to help, to turn back, but survival instinct drove me forward, my legs pumping, my breath ragged. I don't know how long I ran, the maze a relentless gauntlet of twists and dead ends. Eventually, I stumbled into a small chamber, its walls lined with rusted pipes, a dead end with nowhere to go. Panic threatened to drown me, but I forced it down, my eyes scanning for an escape. Then I saw it, a grate near the floor, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. I didn't hesitate, prying it open with trembling fingers, the metal cold and sharp against my skin. I crawled inside, the duct's confines claustrophobic, the air stale and metallic. Every sound, every creak, every distant shout made me freeze, certain the hunters were upon me. The crawl felt endless, my elbows scraping against the duct's walls, my breath louding the confined space. At last, I saw light ahead, faint but promising. I emerged into a cavernous garage, its floor lined with sleek cars, their chrome glinting in the dim glow of an overhead bulb. And there, like a miracle, was a door marked exit. I ran for it, my heart in my throat, expecting it to be locked, but it yielded, swinging open to reveal the night air, cold and sharp with the scent of pine. I didn't stop, sprinting across the chateau's grounds, the frost-crisp grass crunching underfoot, until I reached the main road. Only then did I collapse, gulping air, my body trembling with exhaustion and relief. Police sirens wailed in the distance, their red and blue lights cutting through the dawn's first glow. I'd escaped, but as I caught my breath, I thought of those still trapped in the chateau's depths, Nora, the others, lost in that subterranean hell. The aftermath was a blur of police interviews and news reports. The host, a reclusive tycoon with a penchant for cruelty, was arrested, his game exposed as a sadistic ritual for the elite. But many of his hunters vanished, their plague masks discarded in the tunnels. Nora was never found, her fate a wound that festers still. The chateau's tunnels stretched for miles, the police said, some bodies likely lost forever in their depths. I still dream of that night of masked figures with inhuman eyes, of endless corridors and the weight of leaving others behind. Halloween holds no joy for me now, its magic tainted by the truth that monsters don't always wear costumes. Sometimes, they're all too real, and sometimes, they win. Story 11. The mist rolled across Lake Morwen's glassy surface, thick as a shroud, swallowing the horizon and muffling the world in an oppressive silence. I sat in my small fishing boat, the oars stowed, my line cast into the inky depths, the only sound the gentle lap of water against the hull. The Upper Peninsula's rugged beauty had always been my refuge, a place to escape the clamor of life, and Lake Morwen, with its pine-fringed shores and hidden coves, was my sanctuary. My name is Daniel, and I've been fishing these waters since I was a boy, my father's lessons on tides and tackle as familiar as my own heartbeat. That night, I pushed off from the dock as the sun bled into the horizon, planning a quiet session of night fishing, the solitude a balm for my restless mind. The weather report had warned of fog, but I wasn't worried. I knew the lake's moods better than my own. Yet, as the mist thickened, cloaking my boat in a gray veil, I couldn't shake a creeping dread, a whisper that I'd cast my line into a nightmare far darker than the lake's depths. The fog grew denser, reducing the world to a 10-foot radius, the shore invisible, the stars extinguished. My lantern's feeble glow did little to pierce the haze, and the air was heavy with the scent of damp pine and something sharper, like rusted iron. The fish were biting, their tugs a steady rhythm, and I let the lake's eerie calm settle over me, the fog's embrace almost soothing. It was nearing midnight when a sound broke the stillness, a low, mournful wail, like a foghorn from a bygone era, its timbre rusted and ancient. I froze, my line slack in my hands, and listened. It came again, louder, closer, a sound that seemed to rise from the lake itself, chilling me to the bone. I peered into the fog, my eyes straining, and that's when I saw it, a massive shape looming through the mist, its edges blurred as if viewed through a warped lens. As it drew closer, details emerged, each one more unsettling than the last. It was a ship, but not one that belonged on Morwen's tranquil waters. Its hull was iron, pitted with rust, its deck lined with skeletal cranes, a relic of the ore freighters that plied the Great Lakes a century ago. No lights burned, no engines hummed, and yet it moved, gliding silently, impossibly, through the fog. My first thought was a historical reenactment, a tourist stunt, but as it loomed nearer, I sensed a wrongness, a distortion in the air, as if the ship existed outside the natural order. I squinted at the hull, catching the faded letters painted there, SS Iron Wraith. My blood ran cold. The Iron Wraith was a legend in these parts, a freighter lost in a 1912 gale on Lake Superior, its 32 crew swallowed by the storm. Its wreck was never found, its fate fodder for campfire tales and tavern whispers. What I was seeing was impossible, a ghost ship, conjured from the lake's depths, defying reason and reality. I gripped the oars, ready to row for shore, when a voice called from the deck, faint and desperate. "Help us," it pleaded, the words trembling with anguish. "Please, help us." Every instinct screamed to flee, to put distance between me and this apparition, but the voice stirred something human in me, a duty to aid those in distress. Swallowing my fear, I started my outboard motor, its cough shattering the silence, and maneuvered closer, the wraith's towering hull dwarfing my boat. A rusted ladder hung from the ship's side, its rungs slick with algae. I tied my boat to it, the rope cold and slimy in my hands, and began to climb, each step a battle against the ladder's treacherous surface. The air grew heavier, thick with a stench of rust, seaweed, and something fouler, like decay left to fester. As I hauled myself onto the deck, the full weight of my mistake crashed over me. The deck was desolate, its planks warped and splintered, devoid of life. The air felt wrong, oppressive, as if the ship itself resented my presence. "Hello?" I called, my voice small, swallowed by the fog. "Is anyone here?" I heard a call for help. Silence answered, but it was not empty. Shadows flickered at the edges of my vision, shapes that vanished when I turned to look, their presence a cold weight on my neck. I felt them watching, their unseen eyes boring into me, and my heart began to race. The deck shifted beneath my feet, not with the lake's gentle roll but with an unnatural lurch, as if the ship were alive, reshaping itself. I knew I had to get off, to escape this haunted relic before it claimed me. I turned back to the ladder, my pulse hammering, only to find it gone. The deck's edge now hung over a void, the fog swirling where my boat should have been. Panic clawed at my chest. I was trapped on a ghost ship, surrounded by entities I couldn't see but could feel, their malice thick in the air. I forced myself to move, heading for what I hoped was the bridge, reasoning that there might be a radio, a flare, something to signal for help. The deck was a maze of rusted machinery and coiled ropes, each step treacherous, the fog distorting distances and directions. The bridge door was a slab of corroded steel, its hinges screaming as I wrenched it open. Inside was a time capsule of maritime history, brass dials and levers, their surfaces tarnished, charts crumbling to dust on a table. And there, slumped over the ship's wheel, was a figure, its form shrouded in shadow. Hope surged, reckless and fleeting. "Hey!" I called, stepping closer. "Are you okay?" The figure didn't move. As I neared, the truth hit me like a blow. What I'd thought was a person was a skeleton, its bones clad in the tattered remnants of a captain's uniform, the fabric rotting to threads. I stumbled back, a scream caught in my throat, the bridge spinning around me. This was madness, a waking nightmare I couldn't escape. A noise behind me made me whirl, a creak, deliberate, and there, blocking the doorway, stood a man. But he was no man. His flesh was bloated, pale as a drowned corpse, his eyes milky voids, seaweed tangled in his hair, water dripping from his form in endless rivulets. "Welcome aboard," he said, his voice a gurgling rasp, as if spoken from underwater. "We've been waiting for you." I backed away, my mind reeling, my flashlight trembling in my grip. "What are you?" I gasped. my voice barely a whisper. His smile revealed teeth like jagged fish bones. "We are the crew of the Iron Wraith, lost but never gone. And now, you'll join us." More figures materialized behind him, their forms decayed, their eyes gleaming with the same lifeless hunger. They advanced, their hands outstretched, their movements jerky, as if pulled by unseen strings. Survival instinct surged, drowning out fear. I grabbed a heavy logbook from a nearby shelf and hurled it at the lead figure. It passed through him, scattering papers, but the action startled them, buying me a moment. I shoved past, their cold, wet hands grazing my skin, and ran, the bridge's confines giving way to the ship's labyrinthine interior. The corridors twisted impossibly, doors leading to places they shouldn't, as if the Wraith reshaped itself to keep me trapped. The crew pursued, their waterlogged footsteps echoing, their gurgled voices calling my name. I burst onto the deck again, but it was different now, tilted at a sickening angle, water sloshing over one side. With a jolt of horror, I realized the ship was sinking, the lake rising to claim it. The crew was closer, their forms emerging from the fog, their hands reaching. In desperation, I sprinted for the railing, my boots slipping on the wet planks, and without pausing to think, I jumped. The shock of the cold water stole my breath, the lake's icy grip dragging me down. For a moment, I was certain I'd drown, the darkness closing in, but my survival training kicked in. I kicked upward, breaking the surface, gasping for air. The Wraith was gone, the fog unbroken, the lake a mirror of mist. I treaded water, my body numb, my mind reeling. Then I heard it, a distant hum, the purr of an engine. I shouted, my voice hoarse, waving my arms. A beam of light cut through the fog, a Coast Guard vessel, its hull a beacon of salvation. They pulled me from the water, wrapping me in blankets, their faces creased with concern as I babbled about the ghost ship, the undead crew. They exchanged glances, clearly thinking me delirious, but I saw the unease in their eyes, a recognition of the lake's dark legends. At the hospital, I was deemed physically fine, my cuts and bruises minor. But the police shared a chilling truth: disappearances had plagued Morwen for months, all on foggy nights, all in the same stretch where I'd encountered the Wraith. They called it mass hallucination, blamed toxic algae, but I knew what I'd seen, what I'd felt. I don't fish on Morwen anymore, can't bring myself to touch a boat. But sometimes, on foggy nights, I'm drawn to the shore, the mist curling like fingers over the water. I swear I hear it, the Wraith's mournful horn, calling from the depths, seeking new souls to join its damned crew. And I wonder how many more will answer before the ghost ship finds its rest. Story 12. The wind howled through the Adirondack Mountains, a feral scream that drowned out the faltering sputter of my car's engine as it succumbed to the blizzard's wrath. Snow swirled in a blinding whiteout, obliterating the narrow forest road, and my sedan shuddered to a halt, its headlights swallowed by the storm. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white, my breath fogging the windshield as the cold seeped through the glass. I'd been driving back from a work conference in Albany, opting for a scenic route through the wilderness to clear my head before returning to the city's chaos. But the storm had descended with merciless speed, transforming the tranquil pines into a frozen labyrinth. My name is Sophia, and I've always prided myself on my preparedness, my emergency kit a testament to my caution. Yet, nothing could have prepared me for the nightmare that awaited when I sought shelter, unaware that the cozy cabin I thought was my salvation would become a prison ruled by a madman's twisted obsessions. I turned the key again, the engine's feeble whine mocking my efforts. The dashboard flickered, then died, leaving me in darkness save for the storm's ghostly glow. My phone was useless, its screen showing no bars, the Adirondacks' remoteness a barrier no signal could breach. The temperature was plummeting, the car's interior already icing over, and I knew staying put was a death sentence. Hypothermia would claim me long before dawn. I had to find shelter, a place to ride out the blizzard until help could come. Grabbing my emergency kit, flashlight, blanket, water, and a few protein bars, I zipped my parka and stepped into the storm. The wind hit like a physical force, nearly knocking me off my feet, snow stinging my face like shards of glass. I shielded my eyes with one arm, my flashlight's beam struggling against the whiteout, and picked a direction, trusting instinct over logic. Each step was a battle, the snow knee-deep, my boots sinking with every stride. My fingers numbed, my face ached, and despair began to creep in, whispering that I'd die out here, lost in the frozen wild. Just when I thought I could go no further, a faint glow pierced the storm, a light, warm and golden, flickering in the distance. Hope surged, a fragile flame against the cold, and I pushed forward, the promise of warmth driving me through the drifts. As I drew closer, the shape of a cabin emerged, its log walls sturdy, its chimney trailing a thin ribbon of smoke into the blizzard. Icicles hung from the eaves, glinting like daggers, and the windows glowed with the promise of safety. I stumbled onto the porch, my fists pounding the heavy pine door, the sound barely audible over the wind's roar. "Hello," I shouted, my voice raw. "Please, I need help." For a long moment, there was nothing, the storm's howl my only answer. Then, footsteps approached, and the door creaked open, revealing a man silhouetted against the firelight. He was tall and lean, his beard wild, his eyes sharp and piercing, like those of a hawk sizing up prey. "Good God, miss," he said, his voice gravelly, laced with surprise. "What are you doing out in this storm? Come in, come in." I all but fell across the threshold, the sudden absence of wind disorienting, the cabin's warmth enveloping me like a blanket. The man steadied me, his hands strong, and led me to a chair by the crackling fireplace. "Thank you," I gasped, shivering, my teeth chattering as the heat began to thaw my frozen limbs. My car broke down. I didn't know what to do. "You're half frozen," he said, his tone kind but edged with something I couldn't place. "Let me get you something warm." He disappeared into the kitchen, leaving me to take in my surroundings. The cabin was cozy but cluttered, its walls lined with shelves of books and maps, their edges curling with age. Strange diagrams were pinned to the beams, cryptic symbols and weather charts that made no sense to my city-bred mind. A table held scientific instruments, barometers, thermometers, and jars of unidentifiable substances, giving the place the air of a mad inventor's lair. He returned with a steaming mug of tea, its herbal scent soothing. "Just tea," he said, handing it to me. "It'll warm you up." I sipped gratefully, the liquid burning a path to my core. "I'm Sophia," I said, my voice steadier. "Thank you for this. I don't know what I'd have done if I hadn't found you." "Name's Elias," he replied, his smile tight, not quite reaching his eyes. "No trouble at all. Couldn't leave you out there to freeze, could I?" As we talked, I began to relax, the fire's warmth easing my tension. Elias said he was a meteorologist, studying the Adirondacks' erratic weather patterns, which explained the maps and gadgets scattered around. storm like this won't let up till morning," he said, glancing at the window, where snow lashed the glass. "You're welcome to stay the night. No guest room, I'm afraid, but the couch is decent." I hesitated, the idea of staying in a stranger's cabin unsettling, but the blizzard left me no choice. "That's kind of you," I said, forcing a smile. "If it's no trouble." "No trouble," he said, that odd smile returning, a flicker of something dark in his gaze. As the night wore on, my unease grew, a nagging instinct I couldn't shake. Elias's eyes lingered too long when he thought I wasn't looking, his movements too deliberate, like a predator circling. He'd pause mid-sentence, his head tilting as if listening to the storm or something else. I told myself I was paranoid, that he'd saved my life, but the cabin's warmth felt increasingly like a trap. Needing a moment to clear my head, I excused myself to the bathroom, a small room off a narrow hallway. As I passed a door slightly ajar, a muffled thump stopped me cold, like something or someone moving inside. Curiosity overrode caution, and I pushed the door open a fraction, peering into the gloom. What I saw turned my blood to ice. The room was a workshop, its walls lined with shelves of jars filled with strange liquids, wires and electrodes dangling from a makeshift bench. In the center, strapped to a table, was a person, their wrists and ankles bound with leather straps, a gag muffling their cries. Their eyes, wide with terror, locked onto mine, pleading for rescue. I must have gasped, because Elias was there in an instant, his hand clamping onto my shoulder, his grip like iron. Now, he said, his voice eerily calm. "You shouldn't be poking around where you don't belong, Sophia." His eyes were cold, devoid of the warmth he'd feigned, and I realized with sickening clarity that the man who'd saved me was a monster. I tried to run, twisting out of his grasp, but he dragged me into the workshop, ignoring my struggles. "I wish you hadn't seen this," he said, forcing me into a chair, his strength overwhelming. "Things could have been so much simpler." He bound my wrists with rope, the fibers biting into my skin, and began to talk, his voice taking on a fevered edge. "You don't understand the storms, they're not natural. Something's out there, in the mountains, controlling them. I'm trying to stop it, to save us all. You're part of it now, part of the experiment." His words were madness, a delusional rant, but the syringes and vials on the table were all too real. He moved between me and the other captive, a hiker, I later learned, missing for weeks, injecting us with something that made the room spin, my thoughts fracturing like ice. Through the haze, I worked at the ropes, my fingers raw, desperation fueling my efforts. Elias was absorbed in his work, muttering, scribbling notes, his back to me. The ropes began to give, the fibers loosening just enough. It was now or never. I lunged from the chair, grabbing a heavy glass beaker from the table, and brought it down on Elias's head with all my strength. The glass shattered, and he crumpled, blood pooling beneath him. I didn't pause to check if he was alive. I stumbled to the hiker, my hands trembling as I untied their bonds. "Come on," I gasped, helping them to their feet, their eyes dazed but determined. The storm had eased, the world outside a pristine expanse of snow, the air biting as we stumbled through the drifts. Fear kept us moving, the cold a distant pain compared to the terror of Elias waking, pursuing. We reached a logging road, the snow packed by recent tires, and flagged down a passing truck, its driver a grizzled logger who took one look at our wild eyes and threw open the door. He drove us to a ranger station, listening in stunned silence as we babbled our story. The police descended on the cabin, but Elias was gone, his tracks lost in the snow. What they found inside notebooks of deranged theories, vials of unknown compounds, and evidence of other victims haunted me more than the chase. They never caught him, his fate as elusive as the storms he claimed to fight. I don't drive those back roads anymore, can't bear the sight of snow without hearing his voice, whispering of experiments and mountain gods. The Adirondacks, once a place of beauty, now hold a darkness I can't unsee, a reminder that monsters don't always lurk in the storm. They wait behind a warm smile, ready to turn salvation into a nightmare. Story 13. The campfire's embers glowed like dying stars, their faint warmth battling the creeping chill of the Ozark National Forest. The night was a tapestry of darkness, woven with the rustle of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl, the towering pines standing sentinel around our small clearing. I sat cross-legged on a blanket, the scent of wood smoke and pine needles filling my lungs, my gaze drifting to Ethan, his silhouette sharp against the fire's flicker. We'd ventured deep into this wilderness for a weekend escape, a chance to trade the city's clamor for the raw serenity of nature. My name is Ava, and I've always found peace in the outdoors. The forests embrace a counterpoint to life's chaos. But as the flames cast jittery shadows across the trees, a primal unease stirred within me, a whisper that our sanctuary was about to become a battleground, our peaceful retreat a desperate fight for survival against predators cloaked in the night. Our journey had begun with the promise of adventure. Ethan and I, armed with backpacks and a shared love for the wild, had spent weeks plotting a route through the Ozarks, choosing trails far from the crowded campgrounds and tourist haunts. We set out on a crisp Friday morning, the air sharp with autumn's bite, our boots crunching on gravel paths as we wove through valleys aglow with amber foliage. The first day was a symphony of discovery, steep climbs rewarded with vistas of rolling hills, streams glinting like silver threads, and the chatter of squirrels darting through the underbrush. By dusk, we'd found a perfect campsite, a secluded glade cradled by a babbling brook, its waters murmuring secrets to the moss-covered stones. We pitched our tent, its blue nylon a vibrant splash against the forest's earthy tones, and built a fire, its crackle a comforting hymn as we shared a meal of trail mix and dehydrated stew. The second day brought a subtle shift, a tightening in the air like the pause before a storm. We'd set out to explore a nearby ridge, our packs light, our laughter echoing through the trees. The trail was rugged, roots and rocks testing our balance, but the view from the ridge was breathtaking, a sea of green stretching to the horizon, the Ozarks' heart laid bare. Ethan was snapping photos when I froze, a sound slicing through the forest's hum, voices, faint but sharp, carried on the wind. "Did you hear that?" I asked, my voice low, my eyes scanning the dense thickets below. Ethan lowered his camera, his brow furrowing. "Hear what?" "Voices," I said, my pulse quickening. "Like someone shouting, out there." He tilted his head, listening, but the forest offered only its usual coarse wind, leaves, the distant call of a hawk. "Maybe other campers," he suggested, his tone reassuring, but I saw the flicker of doubt in his eyes. We continued our hike, but the ease of the morning had vanished, replaced by a wary tension. Every rustle in the underbrush, every snap of a twig, set my nerves alight, and Ethan stayed close, his usual banter subdued. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, our steps shadowed by unseen eyes hidden in the green. We returned to our campsite as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in hues of fire and dusk. The glade felt different now, its tranquility tainted by an unspoken dread. As we prepared dinner, the fire glow a fragile shield against the gathering dark, Ethan voiced what I'd been thinking. "Maybe we should head back tomorrow," he said, stirring the pot, his voice careful. "This place feels off." I nodded, relief mingling with guilt. "Yeah, let's do it. Just one more night." But the words felt hollow, the forest's vastness pressing closer, its shadows deeper than before. Night fell like a curtain, the stars blazing above, their light cold and distant. We huddled by the fire, our voices hushed, as if afraid to disturb the silence. The flames cast flickering shapes on the pines, their dance both mesmerizing and menacing. Every sound, a leaf's rustle, a branch's creak made us flinch, our senses sharpened by the unease that had taken root. It was just after midnight when a sound shattered the quiet, a low, eerie whistle, sharp and deliberate, answered by another from the clearing's far side. My heart lurched, my hand gripping Ethan's arm, his muscles tensing beneath my fingers. "Ava," he whispered, his voice barely audible, "someone's out there." Before I could respond, a figure stepped into the firelight, a man, lean and weathered, his face half hidden by a scraggly beard, his eyes glinting with the predator's hunger. He held a rifle, its barrel catching the flame's glow, and his presence filled the clearing like a storm cloud. Well, he rasped, his voice rough as the gravel paths we'd hiked. "Looks like we've got company, boys." As if summoned, more figures emerged from the shadows, 5 in total, all armed, their clothes tattered, their gazes cold and calculating. My stomach twisted, fear flooding my veins as I took in their weapons, rifles, handguns, a glint of steel that promised violence. Ethan stood slowly, pulling me with him, his hand steady despite the terror in his eyes. "We don't want trouble," he said, his voice calm but firm. "We're just camping. We'll pack up and leave now, no problem." The leader's laugh was a jagged blade, cutting through the night. "You ain't going nowhere," he said, stepping closer, his rifle loose but ready. "We've got a little operation out here, and we can't have you two spilling our secrets." My mind raced, piecing together the truth. Drugs, likely meth, cooked in some hidden hollow, the Ozarks' remoteness a perfect cloak for their crimes. We'd wandered too close, our presence a threat they couldn't ignore. "We haven't seen anything," I said, my voice high with desperation. "We don't even know where we are. Please, just let us go." The leader tilted his head, his eyes narrowing, as if weighing my words. "Can't risk it, sweetheart," he said, his tone mocking. "You're staying with us." His men closed in, their circle tightening, and I saw a flash of rope in one's hand, its purpose chillingly clear. Instinct took over, raw and fierce. Ethan grabbed a burning log from the fire, its heat searing the air, and hurled it at the nearest man. The man yelped, embers scattering across his chest, and the others flinched, their formation breaking. "Run!" Ethan shouted, shoving me toward the forest's darkest edge. We plunged into the underbrush, branches clawing at our faces, roots snaring our feet. Behind us, shouts erupted, angry and urgent, followed by the thunder of pursuit. The forest was a labyrinth of shadow and thorn, the moonlight barely piercing the canopy. We ran blindly, our breaths dragged, our hearts pounding like war drums. Ethan stumbled, and I caught him, dragging him forward, his hand warm in mine. "Keep going," I gasped, my voice hoarse. "We can't stop." The men were close, their flashlight beams slicing through the darkness, their curses a relentless chorus. They knew the terrain, their steps sure where ours faltered, and they were gaining. Just when I thought we were lost, we burst onto the edge of a steep ravine, the brook we'd camped by now a roaring torrent below, its waters churning in the moonlight's silver glow. Ethan's eyes were wild, his breath coming in gasps. "What now?" he panted, his voice breaking. I glanced back, the flashlight beams dancing closer, their voices a snarling cacophony. "We jump," I said, pointing to the ravine's far side, maybe 10 feet across, a desperate leap but our only chance. Ethan's face paled, but the sound of approaching footsteps sealed his resolve. He nodded, his jaw tight. "On 3, I said, clutching his hand, our fingers intertwined. 1, 2, 3. We leapt, the ground vanishing, the roar of the water deafening below. For a heart-stopping moment, we were weightless, the night holding its breath, then we hit the other side, rolling to break our fall. Pain flared in my ankle, but adrenaline dulled it, urging us into the trees. Shouts of frustration echoed behind us. The ravine had slowed them, buying us precious time. We pushed on, our bodies screaming, the forest a gauntlet of brambles and shadows. Every sound a snapping twig, a rustling leaf froze us, certain we'd been found. Dawn's first light began to filter through the canopy, gilding the pines, when we heard it, the hum of engines, the blessed sound of civilization. We stumbled onto a dirt road, its ruts packed with mud, and flagged down a battered pickup, its driver an elderly farmer with a weathered face. He took one look at our torn clothes, our wild eyes, and threw open the door. "Get in," he said, his voice gruff but kind. As he drove us to a ranger station, we poured out our story, the words tumbling in a frantic rush. The station was a simple log building, its warmth a stark contrast to the forest's chill. The ranger, a grizzled man with a no-nonsense air, listened intently, his expression hardening as we described the armed men. He ushered us inside, locking the door, and grabbed a rifle from a rack. "Stay here," he ordered, moving to the window. "Backup's on the way, but it'll take time." The next few minutes were a taut wire of tension, the men's voices growing closer, their anger palpable as they realized our refuge. The ranger stood firm, his rifle steady, ordering them to stand down. For a moment, I feared a shootout, the air thick with the threat of violence, but the distant wail of sirens broke their nerve. They fled into the forest, their footsteps fading as police vehicles roared into view. The aftermath was a haze of statements and medical checks, my ankle wrapped, Ethan's cuts cleaned. We told the authorities everything, the whistles, the armed men, the chase through the night. They searched the Ozarks, but the men had vanished, their operation likely dismantled in haste. Days later, they were caught attempting to flee Arkansas, their gear a damning catalog of their crimes. Ethan and I never returned to the Ozarks, our love for the wild tempered by the memory of that night. But it forged a deeper bond, a shared strength born of facing death together. Now, when we camp always near others, never far from safety, we recall that night with a quiet pride. We survived the forest's darkest heart, outran predators who saw us as prey, and emerged stronger. The Ozarks taught us that beauty hides danger, that the wild is both sanctuary and threat. Sometimes, by a fire glow, we remember not the fear but the courage we found, the will to protect each other when the shadows closed in. Story 14. The forest floor of the Bitterroot Wilderness was a mosaic of pine needles and shadow. its silence broken only by the crunch of my boots and the distant call of a raven. Sunlight filtered through the dense canopy, casting dappled patterns across the rugged trail, the air sharp with the scent of resin and damp earth. I'd come to these remote Idaho woods for a solo hiking trip, seeking the clarity that only nature's vastness could provide. My name is Liam, and the wilderness has always been my refuge, a place to shed the weight of the world and find solace in solitude. But as I ventured deeper into the bitter root's untamed heart, a discovery turned my peaceful escape into a nightmare, a series of makeshift graves that marked me as prey in a serial killer's hunting ground, forcing me to run for my life before I joined the silent dead beneath the pines. The first day had been a triumph of endurance and awe. I'd set out at dawn, my backpack loaded with supplies, following a faint trail that wound through valleys and over rocky ridges. The bitter route was a labyrinth of beauty, snow-dusted peaks looming in the distance, streams glittering like veins of silver, and meadows ablaze with wildflowers. I camped at night under a sky strewn with stars, the fire's warmth a comfort as I traced constellations, my heart full of the trail's promise. The next morning, I broke camp early, eager to explore deeper, the path growing wilder, its markers swallowed by undergrowth. I wasn't worried. My GPS and years of backcountry experience gave me confidence, even as the trail faded into a game path, barely discernible among the ferns. By late afternoon, the forest had changed, its vibrancy giving way to a hushed, oppressive stillness. I'd veered off the main route, following a deer track in search of a campsite, when I stumbled upon a patch of earth that looked wrong, unnatural. The soil was mounded, freshly turned, strewn with wilted wildflowers, their petals curling like spent offerings. My stomach twisted, a cold dread seeping into my bones. I stepped closer, my breath shallow, and noticed details that turned my unease to horror. A scrap of fabric protruding from the dirt, strands of what could only be human hair glinting in the sunlight. This was no animal's grave. It was a burial, recent and deliberate. I staggered back, my pulse hammering, my eyes darting across the clearing. The forest revealed its secrets now. Other mounds, some older, their edges softened by time, scattered like grim landmarks among the trees. Panic clawed at my chest, the realization crashing over me, I'd wandered into a killer's dumping ground, a hidden necropolis where the lost were left to rot. I needed to get out, to reach civilization and alert the authorities, but as I turned to flee, a twig snapped behind me, sharp as a gunshot in the silence. I froze, my senses razor sharp, straining to hear. It could have been a deer, a falling branch, but the weight of the sound, its deliberate cadence, told me otherwise. Someone was out there, watching, their presence a cold weight on my neck. Moving as silently as I could, I crept toward a massive cedar, its gnarled roots offering cover. I crouched behind it, my heart thundering, my breath shallow, and peered into the forest's gloom. The air was thick, the shadows deeper, as if the wilderness itself conspired to hide my stalker. "I know you're there," a voice called, calm and chillingly friendly, slicing through the silence. It was a man's voice, steady, almost amused. "No use hiding. Come out, and we can talk." My blood ran cold, the words a lure, a predator's coaxing. I'd seen enough documentaries to know how this played out. He'd try to draw me out, to gain my trust, then bury me beside the others. I stayed still, my body pressed against the cedar's rough bark, my mind racing. I had no weapon, only my wits and the forest's cover. "Come on now," the voice continued, closer, boots crunching on pine needles. I won't hurt you. I just want to explain." The lie was palpable, his tone too smooth, too practiced. I peered around the tree, catching a glimpse of him, a tall figure, broad-shouldered, clad in camouflage gear, a rifle slung across his back. His face was shadowed, but his movements were deliberate, a hunter tracking his quarry. I needed to act, to create a diversion. I grabbed a stone from the ground, its weight solid in my hand, and hurled it into the underbrush, the crash echoing through the trees. The man whirled toward the sound, his rifle raised, shouting, "I see you." It was my chance. I bolted from cover, running with reckless abandon, branches whipping my face, roots threatening to trip me. The forest was a blur of green and shadow, my lungs burning, my legs fueled by terror. Behind me, his curses rang out, followed by the thunder of pursuit, his boots pounding the earth. I leapt over fallen logs, crashed through thickets, the stinging cuts on my cheeks ignored in my desperation. He was close, his breath audible, his presence a relentless force at my back. I had no plan, no destination, only the primal need to survive. The forest seemed to conspire against me, its paths twisting, its shadows deepening. Suddenly, the ground dropped away, and I tumbled down a steep embankment, rolling through dirt and leaves, pain flaring in my ribs. I hit the bottom hard, the air driven from my lungs, stars bursting in my vision. Above, the sound of sliding rocks snapped me back. He was coming down, his silhouette looming against the ridge. Ignoring the ache in my side, I scrambled to my feet and ran, the forest denser here, the undergrowth a tangle of thorns that tore at my clothes. It slowed me, but it would slow him too, I reasoned, pushing through the pain. Time blurred, each step a battle against exhaustion, my throat raw, my mouth dry as dust. Just when I thought I could run no further, I burst through the tree line onto a gravel road, its surface scarred by tire tracks. Relief flooded me, so intense I nearly wept. A road meant people, safety, a way out. I glanced behind, expecting to see him emerge, but the forest was silent, its shadows holding their breath. I turned and ran along the road, my boots pounding, my lungs screaming. The bitter route stretched endlessly, no sign of a vehicle, no hint of civilization, but I didn't stop, driven by the fear that he was still out there, tracking me. After what felt like an eternity, headlights pierced the dusk, a battered Jeep rumbling toward me. I waved frantically, my arms heavy, praying the driver would stop. The Jeep slowed, an older woman peering out, her face creased with concern. "You okay, son?" she asked, her voice warm but wary. "Please," I gasped, fighting to catch my breath, "I need help. There's a man, he's after me. I need the police." Her eyes widened, but she nodded, unlocking the passenger door. "Get in. We'll get you to town." As we sped away, I kept looking back, half expecting to see him standing in the road, rifle raised, but there was only darkness, the forest swallowing its secrets. The rest of the night was a blur of police stations and medical tents. I told them everything: the graves, the man, the chase through the wilderness, my voice hoarse, my hands trembling. They found the site, a grim tableau of shallow graves, some fresh, others weathered, the remains bearing witness to a killer's long reign. The police called it the work of a serial predator, active in the bitter route for years, but he'd vanished, his tracks lost in the vast wilderness. They searched for weeks, but he was a ghost, leaving only his victims and my nightmares. I don't hike alone anymore, the forest's peace tainted by the memory of those mounds, the echo of his voice. The bitterroot, once my haven, now feels like a predator's lair, every shadow hiding a threat. I stick to crowded trails, always with others, and I've become a voice for hikers' safety, sharing my story as a warning. The wilderness is beautiful but merciless, its dangers not just in its cliffs or bears but in the human monsters who stalk its depths. I think of that day often, of how close I came to being another grave, another forgotten name. It's a sobering truth, but it's also a testament to my resilience. I outran a killer, lived to tell the tale, and carried the scars as proof that I'm stronger than the darkness that tried to claim me. Story 15. The fluorescent lights of the Crossroads Diner buzzed like a swarm of restless wasps, casting a harsh glow over the chipped linoleum counter and the vinyl booths worn smooth by years of wearied travelers. The Nevada highway outside stretched into the night, a desolate ribbon of asphalt flanked by sagebrush and starlight, the only sound the occasional rumble of a passing rig. I stood behind the counter, wiping down the coffee-stained surface, the clock ticking past 11 p.m. My name is Owen, and for the past 6 months, I've worked the graveyard shift at this lonely outpost, serving truckers and drifters while scribbling notes for a novel I dream of finishing. The job was quiet, predictable, the perfect backdrop for my writing until the night I saw her, a girl with haunted eyes whose presence unraveled a sinister web of human trafficking, thrusting me into a battle against an evil I could no longer ignore. I clocked in as the day shift ended, nodding to Pete, the evening clerk, as he grabbed his jacket and headed out. "Slow night, Owen," he said, his voice gruff. "Hope you brought a good book." I smiled, settling into the rhythm of the diner, refilling coffee pots, restocking napkin dispensers, the hum of the jukebox a faint companion. The first few hours were uneventful, a steady trickle of truckers shuffling in for greasy burgers and black coffee, their faces etched with the exhaustion of long hauls. I jotted ideas in my notebook between orders, the neon open sign flickering in the window, a beacon in the desert's vast emptiness. It was around 2 a.m. when the bell above the door jingled, and she walked in, a girl, no older than 16, her frame slight, her eyes downcast, shadowed by a hood that barely hid her pale face. She was with a man, older, his face hard and weathered, his jacket stained with grease. He steered her toward the restrooms at the back, his grip on her arm too tight, his voice a low growl. "Stay put," he snapped, before turning to the counter. "Pack of smokes," he demanded, avoiding my gaze, his fingers drumming impatiently. I reached for the cigarettes, my eyes flicking to the security mirror above the register. The girl stood where he'd left her, motionless, but her gaze darted frantically, like a trapped animal seeking escape. Her hands twisted in her sleeves, her posture screaming fear, and a cold knot formed in my gut. I handed the man his smokes, keeping my voice even. "Everything okay with your friend?" I asked, nodding toward the girl. His head snapped up, eyes narrowing to slits. "Mind your own damn business," he snarled, snatching the pack and stalking back to her. He grabbed her arm, yanking her toward the door, her steps faltering as they disappeared into the night. My stomach churned, the diner's warmth suddenly stifling. Something was wrong, deeply wrong, and the girl's haunted eyes burned in my mind, a silent plea I couldn't ignore. Over the next few weeks, I saw others like her, young girls, always with older men, their movements guarded, their faces etched with fear. They came in at odd hours, the men exchanging hushed words and furtive glances, their trucks idling in the lot like predators waiting to pounce. I began to notice patterns, the same rigs, the same tense exchanges, the way the girls never spoke, never looked up. My notebook filled with observations, each one a weight on my conscience. I knew I was witnessing something criminal, a darkness operating in plain sight, but fear held me back. What if I was wrong? What if I was seeing patterns where none existed? And if I was right, what could a diner clerk do against what seemed like a vast, organized machine? The truth demanded action on a quiet Wednesday night, when a familiar rig pulled into the lot around 3 a.m. The driver, a regular I'd dubbed Scar for the mark on his cheek, strode in alone, but when he left, 2 girls trailed him, their steps unsteady, their eyes glazed as if drugged. They could barely walk, leaning on each other, their faces pale under the diner's harsh lights. My heart pounded, a drumbeat of urgency I could no longer silence. This was it, the moment to act or forever carry the guilt of inaction. With shaking hands, I grabbed the phone behind the counter and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? The dispatcher's voice crackled, steady and calm. I took a deep breath, my eyes fixed on the security monitors, where Scar was ushering the girls into his rig. I think I've uncovered a human trafficking ring at the Crossroads Diner on Highway 95, I said, my voice low but firm. I've been seeing girls, young ones, with men who treat them like property. It's happening now. There's a truck outside, and they're moving them. The dispatcher's tone sharpened. Can you provide more details, sir? I recounted everything, the girls, the men, the patterns I tracked over weeks, describing Scar's rig, the girls' dazed states. As I spoke, I watched the monitors, my pulse racing. A van pulled into the lot, its side unmarked, and more girls were herded inside, their movements sluggish, their faces hidden by hoods. They're moving them now, I said, urgency creeping into my voice. There's a van, black, no plates. Please, hurry. The bell jangled, and I froze, the phone still pressed to my ear. One of the men I'd seen before, a burly figure with a shaved head, stepped inside, his eyes locking onto mine. His expression shifted, suspicion hardening his features, and I knew he'd heard me. I have to go, I whispered into the phone, hanging up quickly, my hands trembling as I shoved the receiver under the counter. Who were you talking to? He demanded, striding toward me, his hand resting on his belt, where a bulge suggested a concealed weapon. Just my sister, I lied, forcing a smile, my voice steady despite the fear knotting my gut. She worries if I don't check in. His eyes narrowed, disbelief etched in his scowl. Come out from behind the counter, he said, his tone low, menacing, his hand inching toward his waistband. My mind raced, every instinct screaming danger. I couldn't go outside. If I did, I'd vanish like the girls, another name on a missing persons report. Look, I don't want trouble, I said, raising my hands, my eyes darting for an escape. I don't know anything, haven't seen anything, okay? He smirked, a cold, predatory grin. Oh, you've seen plenty. Now move. Or his words were cut off by a blaze of red and blue lights flooding the parking lot, police cruisers swarming like wolves. His head whipped around, rage contorting his face. You little snitch, he snarled, lunging for his gun. I didn't think. I grabbed the scalding coffee pot from the burner and hurled it at him. The glass shattered, hot liquid splashing his face, and he screamed, stumbling back, clawing at his eyes. I vaulted over the counter, adrenaline surging, and sprinted for the door, bursting into the chaos outside. Officers shouted orders, their guns drawn, the van pinned by a cruiser, its driver raising his hands in surrender. I raised my own hands, shouting, "I'm the one who called." As several officers turned their weapons on me, a cop rushed over, ushering me behind a cruiser. "Stay down," he ordered, before joining the fray. From my vantage, I saw it all: the men dragged from their trucks, handcuffed, their faces twisted with defiance. And the girls, so many, their eyes hollow, some weeping, others dazed, wrapped in blankets by paramedics who moved with gentle urgency. A few tried to run, only to be caught by female officers, their voices soft but firm. The scene was over in minutes, but it felt like hours, the desert air thick with the weight of what had been uncovered. A detective approached, his badge glinting in the cruiser's lights, and took my statement. I told him everything, my voice steady now, the adrenaline ebbing into exhaustion. "You did good, kid," he said when I finished, his tone warm. "Real good. We've been chasing this ring for months. Your call broke it open." I nodded, the weight of his words settling over me. The girls were safe, or at least on the path to safety: counseling, medical care, a chance to reclaim their lives. The investigation revealed the ring's scope, operating across multiple states, using diners and truck stops as waypoints. Dozens of girls were rescued, some missing for years, their families finally given answers. The diner's owner was arrested, complicit for a cut of the profits, his betrayal a bitter sting. I couldn't stay at the crossroads after that, the memories too raw, the faces of those girls etched in my mind. I found a new job, a quieter one, but I didn't abandon my writing. My novel took shape, a story of the unseen world of trafficking, of the courage to speak when silence is easier. I think of that first girl, her haunted eyes a spark that ignited my resolve. I don't know her fate, but I hope she's free, maybe even finding joy again. On sleepless nights, when the desert silence haunts me, I hold onto that hope, a reminder that evil thrives in shadows, but one voice, one light, can shatter its grip. I'm no hero, just a man who saw wrong and chose to act, and if my story saves even one soul, it's enough. Story 16. The skeletal remains of Blackthorn Sanatorium loomed against the bruised twilight, its crumbling stone facade and shattered windows staring down like the hollow eyes of a forgotten god. Tucked in a desolate corner of upstate New York, the sanatorium was a relic of a darker era, its walls whispering tales of suffering and scandal. I stood at the edge of its weed-choked grounds, my camera bag heavy on my shoulder, the wind carrying the scent of damp earth and decay. My name is Nora, and I've always been drawn to the haunting allure of abandoned places, capturing their decay on my urban exploration blog. Blackthorn was my holy grail, a place steeped in legends of patient abuse and forbidden experiments, its halls rumored to echo with the screams of the restless dead. I didn't believe in ghosts, only in the power of a good story, but as I slipped through the rusted fence, a chill slithered down my spine, a warning I dismissed as the thrill of the forbidden. I had no idea I was stepping into a waking nightmare, hunted by specters who refused to rest, their hunger for the living a trap I might never escape. The sanatorium's grounds were a graveyard of neglect, the cracked pavement overrun with thistles, the air thick with the musty tang of rot. The main entrance gaped open, its iron doors hanging askew, groaning in the breeze like a dying breath. I flicked on my flashlight, its beam cutting through the gloom. revealing peeling plaster and debris-strewn floors. The interior was a labyrinth of decay, its corridors lined with faded signs and rusted gurneys, their walls frozen in time. Dust motes danced in the light, stirred by my passage, and the silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional drip of water or the creak of settling beams. My camera clicked, each frame capturing the sanatorium's desolate beauty: shattered tiles, graffiti-scrawled walls, and windows choked with ivy, their glass long gone. I ventured deeper, my boots echoing in the vastness, the flashlight's beam a fragile shield against the dark. The sanatorium felt alive, its shadows shifting just beyond my sight, as if the building itself watched my intrusion. I was setting up a shot in what must have been a patient's room, its walls scarred with scratches, a rusted bed frame sagging in the corner, when a sound stopped me cold. A shuffle, heavy and deliberate, came from the corridor outside, too purposeful to be a stray animal or the wind's trickery. My heart kicked into a frantic rhythm, my flashlight trembling as I swept it toward the door. "Anyone there?" I called, my voice then swallowed by the sanatorium's hungry silence. No answer, but the air grew heavier, the temperature plummeting. Then, a voice, faint, tremulous, drifting from the hallway. "Help me," it whispered, raw with desperation. "Please, I'm here." My pulse raced, torn between fear and duty. Another explorer, perhaps, injured in the ruins? Or a trap, a lure to draw me deeper? Against my better judgment, I moved toward the sound, my flashlight carving a path through the dust. The voice called again, closer, guiding me to a junction where corridors branched like veins. "Here," it pleaded, and I rounded a corner, my beam falling on a figure huddled against the wall. It was a young woman, her frame frail, clad in a tattered hospital gown, its fabric yellowed with age. She squinted against the light, raising a hand to shield her eyes, her skin pale as moonlight. "Thank you," she gasped, her voice quivering. "I thought no one would come." Something was wrong. Her gown, her speech, they belonged to another time, decades past. I stepped closer, my camera raised, my instincts screaming caution. "Are you hurt?" I asked, my voice steady despite the dread toiling in my gut. "How did you get here?" "They brought me," she said softly, her eyes still downcast. "The doctors, they said they'd fix me." Her words chilled me, the sanatorium's history of cruelty rushing back, shock treatments, lobotomies, patients treated as lab rats. But Blackthorn had been abandoned for years, its doors locked since the 1970s. This couldn't be real. I snapped a photo, the flash illuminating the corridor in a stark burst. In that fleeting light, I saw her clearly and my blood froze. She was translucent, the wall visible through her form, her edges shimmering like a mirage. I stumbled back, my breath hitching. "What are you?" I gasped, the camera slipping in my grip. Her head snapped up, revealing eyes black as voids, a smile stretching across her face, revealing needle-sharp teeth. "We're the ones they left behind," she said, her voice deepening, no longer human. "And now, you'll stay with us." I turned and ran, her laughter echoing, a chilling cacophony that filled the corridor. More voices joined hers, whispers, shrieks, a chorus of the damned swirling around me as I fled, shadows darting at the edges of my vision, their forms vanishing when I looked. I burst into a cavernous atrium, its domed ceiling cracked, moonlight streaming through broken skylights. A grand staircase spiraled upward, but blocking my path to the exit stood a group, some in patient gowns, others in nurses' uniforms or doctors' coats, all with those same black eyes, their smiles grotesque. A tall figure in a blood-stained lab coat stepped forward, his voice a low purr. "Welcome home," he said, his words dripping with malice. "We've been waiting for you." I backed away, my flashlight beam trembling, my mind reeling. "This isn't real," I said, more to myself than to them. "You're not real." The doctor laughed, a sound that clawed at my sanity. "Oh, we're real, my dear. Trapped here, bound by pain and betrayal, waiting for someone to set us free." They advanced, their movements jerky, unnatural, like puppets on frayed strings. I turned and sprinted for the staircase, taking the steps two at a time, their footsteps thundering behind, the sanatorium's walls seeming to pulse with their rage. The upper floors were a maze of corridors and wards, each turn revealing more horrors: patients with hollow gazes, nurses with bloodied hands, doctors wielding rusted scalpels that glinted in the moonlight. I ran blindly, my breath ragged, the air thick with the stench of antiseptic and rot. I stumbled into a treatment room, its walls lined with ancient electroshock machines, their dials frozen, their cables coiled like snakes. The only exit was a small window, its frame warped, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. The door behind me burst open, the spirits flooding in, their black eyes gleaming, their hands reaching with icy intent. I scrambled to the window, my fingers clawing at the rusted latch, the metal biting into my skin. With a desperate heave, the latch gave way, and I dove through, the jagged frame scraping my arms, the glass grazing my skin. I fell, the air rushing past, and landed in a tangle of overgrown shrubs, the impact jarring my bones, stealing my breath. Ignoring the pain, I staggered to my feet and ran, the sanatorium's shadow looming behind me, its windows dark and watchful. I didn't stop until I reached the fence, diving through the gap I'd used to enter, my lungs burning, my body trembling. Only when I was back in my car, the engine roaring to life, the doors locked, did I allow myself to breathe. I sped away, the sanatorium shrinking in my rear-view mirror, but in one of its upper windows, I saw a figure, its black eyes glinting, watching me flee. Safe in my apartment, surrounded by the city's hum, I downloaded my photos, my hands still shaking. Most were as expected: crumbling wards, shadowed corridors, but then I reached the one of the ghost woman. My breath caught. She was solid, her black eyes staring from the screen, and behind her, reflected in a shattered mirror, were dozens of faces, all with those same void-like eyes, their smiles a gallery of horror. I deleted the photos, smashed my camera, and swore off urban exploration, the thrill no longer worth the terror. Blackthorn haunts me still, its echoes lingering in my dreams: black eyes, reaching hands, the suffocating weight of endless corridors. Sometimes, alone at night, I hear whispers, see shadows flicker just beyond my sight, as if the sanatorium spirits followed me home. I never wrote about Blackthorn, never told anyone the truth who would believe me. But I know the dead don't always rest, that places like Blackthorn are wounds in the world, where the tortured linger, their pain a trap for the curious. If you ever pass a crumbling ruin on a lonely road, think twice before exploring. The ghosts of Blackthorn are waiting, eager to welcome you into their eternal home, and once you enter, you may never truly leave.